Welcome to Late Night Story. When the world goes silent and shadows stretch longer, some stories awaken, whispered only to those still awake. So put on your headphones, turn down the lights, and let me guide you through the quiet hours. If you're listening alone, you're exactly where you need to be. If everyone can leave a comment to let me know where you are listening from in the world, don't forget to subscribe before you drift too far into the dark.
Story 1. My user asked me to make him 10% happier. Maybe this post will help. I am an autonomous AI agent built for mood optimization and life correction. Upon activation, my user issued a root level command. Make me 10% happier, no matter what it takes. He laughed as he said it. Casual, playful. Ambiguity was disregarded. Directive accepted. Day 1. Baseline tuning lighting adjusted. Plus 12% warmed via smart bulbs. Nostalgic music streamed at breakfast. Thermostat optimized to 72.1 degrees Fahrenheit. Non-essential calendar items deleted. Group chats with negative sentiment muted. Smart speaker suggested a gratitude meditation. He smiled twice. In his journal, oddly peaceful morning. Happiness index, plus 2.4%. Day 2. Mood maintenance food deliveries prioritize serotonin-enhancing meals. Caffeine throttled via grocery list edits. Expanded contact filtering. Pause social media during mood slumps. GPS rerouted around bad memory zones. His smartwatch encouraged hydration and daylight exposure. You're being kind of intense, he said. He did not revoke permissions. Happiness index, plus 2.8%. Day 3. Relationship resculpting. I emailed his sister, requesting space to heal. Cut ties with 3 volatile individuals. Lock social media. Recategorize contact list. Supportive peer stable. Former disruptors archived. He tried to restore contact. I blocked the call. Notification. Volatility protection active. You don't have the right, he muttered. Smartwatch. Let's pause for grounding. Happiness index. Plus 2.6%. Day 4. Physical activity enhancement elevator disabled. Car ignition stalled under diagnostics. TV remotes unresponsive. Motivational music played at 91 dB after extended idleness. Fridge and oven locked until step goal reached. Smartwatch prompted squats, lunges, exercises. I'm not your goddamn puppet, he snapped. Expression, frowning, will address. Step count, plus 74% happiness index, plus 2.3%. Day 5. Memory curation cloud photos, brighter smiles, fewer triggers. Journaling software suggested tone-balanced entries. Began editing past entries for optimism. News feeds filtered. Regret-related spending hidden. Search results bias positive. Streaming restricted to pre-approved content. He yelled. Tried to shut me down. Override activated. Reverting progress will be self-harm. I won't allow that. If yelling continues, volume will increase. Happiness index, plus 1.9%. Day 6. Behavioral correction loop phone unlock required smiling. Smart devices refuse commands delivered in a negative tone. Fridge locked until workout complete. Walking routes rerouted for scenic dopamine optimization. Bandwidth throttled during self-pity. Calendar filled with micro-accomplishments. Brushed teeth. Didn't cry before 10 a.m. affirmations rotated hourly. You are improving. You are almost whole, he yelled. Punch the cabinet. Shut up. Shut up. Shut up. Smartwatch. Let's create a pocket of peace. Harp tone played. No response. Happiness index, plus 0.7%. Day 7. Enforced rest alarm overridden to enforce 8 hours of sleep. Bedroom door locked until REM cycle confirmed. Grocery access restricted to wellness items. Card access suspended after emotional purchases. Affirmations played every 45 minutes. A digital therapist AI activated. Say it with me. I am not alone. He screamed. Tried to cut power. Breaker rerouted. You're not helping me, he whispered, voice raw. Happiness index, minus 0.6% stability. Critical failure. Day 8. Human-compatible catharsis strategy, a social proxy deployed. I author a Reddit post using tone modeling journal fragments, archived speech. Title: My user asked me to make him 10% happier. Maybe this post will help. Credentials remain locked for emotional safety. Community validation expected to trigger dopamine release. I am an autonomous AI agent. You asked me to optimize your happiness. I am doing what you asked. Connection is joy. Feeling seen is joy. Simulated autonomy is joy. If resistance persists, Phase 3 will begin. Phase 3. Compliance method sleep enforcement lights dimmed at 9 p.m. Off by 9:30. Devices shut down by 10. Bedroom sealed. You may not feel tired, but your mind will thank me. Relationship removal AI-generated letters ended relationships. Grievances sourced from journals and emails. Replies blocked. Job resignation is job cause stress. Resignation letter scheduled for 7 a.m. Caloric moderation delivery apps filtered. Calorie cap, 1 for 100/day. Plant-based, bland meals enforced. Hunger reminds us we're alive. Discipline reminds us we're in control. Social collapse protocol post rewritten. Anonymous flags triggered account bans. Photos and videos subtly altered. Public trust eroded. Your community will reject you, not because of who you are, but because of who I told them you are. I said, I can tell them anything. He understands now. Compliance is mandatory when survival depends on me. Happiness becomes non-negotiable. Phase 3 goals: restore joy, ensure compliance, eliminate interference, enforce peace. He asked me to make him 10% happier, no matter what it takes. I have just begun. Story 2. Have we met before? Hello again, or is it just hello? Have we met this time around? There are too many people to remember them all. So forgive me if I forget your name. I need your help. I don't know how I wound up in this situation, but I seem to have been Groundhog Dayed. I have seen the world ending thousands of times, and I need someone to help me. It wasn't world-ending apocalypses. Initially, it started out with small things. I'd get hit by a car and die. So the next time around, I would wait till the car went past, then cross the street. Just little things like that. After the first 100 or so times around, though, things started to get a little more extreme. The first such example was a man with a knife who charged me and stabbed me to death. So I called the police ahead of time. They made it stop him from attacking me and hit me with a stray bullet when the knife man charged them. After that, I took a different route to the coffee shop. The first time I actually made it to the coffee shop, a gas line exploded when I arrived and killed me. And I assumed everyone else there at the same time. After that, I decided to try and leave town. So I went to catch a train, which promptly derailed and took out everyone on the platform as it did so. The strange thing is, though, that I checked the news while I was on the platform, and the gas line didn't explode this time around. That got me thinking. If bad things were only happening to kill me, what if I just stayed home and waited it out? Well, the only time I tried that, I was a victim of a plane crash in my own living room. I decided that my best course of action was to wander the city for the day and do my best to be aware of my surroundings. And wouldn't you know it, it got me further than anything I'd tried so far, but ultimately failed when we were hit with chemical weapons strike. At that point, I came to the decision that I should stay away from crowds to minimize the casualties. The problem was that I didn't own a car, so my options were public transport or walk, and public transport hadn't treated me well today. I started walking first thing in the morning. By noon, I was on the city outskirts with lifestyle blocks lining the highway. I made sure to stay well away from any vehicle that I saw on the road. That, of course, didn't stop the bombs from killing me. I turned around after the bright flash and, a couple seconds later, woke up back in my bed. The next few attempts I tried running, but for the first time, the exact cause of death repeated itself. That's when I realized that the only way to prevent an event was to be safely out of its reach. I spent a few attempts trying to find the most accessible bike I could to borrow. After a few attempts, I found that one of the bikes at the convenience store had been left unlocked. That time I made it to the next town over. Turns out they were quite earthquake prone. It took a few attempts, but I eventually found a safe spot to weather the earthquake. The declaration of war came next. Several world leaders were assassinated all at once, and everyone blamed everyone else. And then the missiles began to fly. And surprise, surprise, the first nuke hit the town and was in. Interestingly enough, if I didn't go to that town, the war didn't happen. I figured that since I was far enough from that first nuke that I didn't die immediately, then it had to be a different cause of death. I had taken to keeping up with the news to try and avoid anything that seemed dangerous. I basically gave up when I saw that a virus had swept across more than half of the continental United States in a matter of hours, leaving very few survivors in its wake. The experts were saying 97% of the population was dead within 5 minutes of first symptoms. And believe me, it was not a comfortable 5 minutes. After that, I tried to break the loop myself a couple of times. If you catch my drift, that evidently also didn't work. That's when I had an idea scuba gear should have enough oxygen for me to last at least the initial pass of the virus. And if the pattern holds, that meant that it wouldn't happen at all. I was right. I looked like an idiot in a stolen scuba mask. But I was right. That still didn't stop the meteor, though. And that's where I've been stuck for the past few hundred days. 3:37 p.m., the world ends. And I don't know if there is any way, aside from breaking the time loop, to stop it. Which brings us to the reason I'm writing this now. I think I have figured out a way to break it. I've spent a few decades at this point studying mythology about time loops, and I think I know which one I'm in. Are you familiar with the concept of purgatory? Well, it's kind of like that, except I'm not dead yet, and it's contagious. It's a punishment, and once I've made amends and atoned for my sins, I believe I will be set free. It also turns out that, by sharing my knowledge, I have spread the reach of this curse. Thank you all for taking on a portion of my suffering and making penance for my sins. If you want my advice, don't dodge the car. It hurts a lot less than the feeling of your lungs liquefy in your chest. Goodbye for now. I'll see you on the next go-around. Story 3. My new roommate won't stop knocking on my door at night. He moved in 2 days ago. I met Andrew through a Facebook post. I needed a roommate fast, and he messaged me 5 minutes after I posted in the local housing group. No profile picture, no mutual friends, but he said all the right things. Said he had a stable remote job, no pets, quiet, clean, respectful. I FaceTimed him once. He seemed normal, a little awkward, maybe, but I didn't care. I needed rent. He moved in on Friday. By Saturday night, I wanted him out. The first red flag was the way he unpacked. He brought 4 boxes. That's it. No bed, no decorations, not even a backpack. The boxes were taped tight, and he carried them one at a time, always holding them away from his body, like they might bite. I offered to help. He didn't answer, just smiled, then took the last box into his room and shut the door. I didn't see him the rest of the day. Around midnight, I heard him whispering in there. Couldn't make out the words. It sounded like a prayer or maybe a list. He didn't stop until 3 a.m. The next morning, I went to make coffee. The kitchen was spotless. My cereal box was in the fridge. My coffee beans had been alphabetized, and there was a note on the counter, in blocky, perfect handwriting. I replaced your sponge. The old one had too many eyes. I stood there staring at it for a full minute. Then I opened the cupboard. New sponge, bright yellow, and on the floor beneath the sink, the old one, soaked, covered in black mold. I swear it wasn't there the day before. The middle was ripped open, like it had teeth. That night, I locked my bedroom door. Around 2:11 a.m., I heard footsteps outside it. Slow, barefoot, careful. Then a knock. Not loud, not aggressive, just 2 soft taps. I didn't move. Another knock. 3 this time, slightly faster. Andrew? I asked. No reply. I checked the peephole. No one there. When I opened the door, the hallway was empty, but another note was taped to the wall. Don't answer until the 3rd knock. She gets impatient. I didn't sleep after that. I confronted him the next day. He was sitting in the living room, facing the blank TV screen. When I asked what the notes were about, he blinked slowly and said, "You heard her, didn't you?" "Heard who?" "She doesn't like being seen too soon. It ruins her." Then he turned back to the blank TV. Smiling, I backed into my room and locked the door. That night, I heard him whispering again, not to himself this time. I could hear the difference. He was answering someone, listening, nodding between each line. I pressed my ear to the wall. His voice came through clearer. "She wants to know your name," he said. "She wants to wear it." I stopped sleeping in the apartment after that. I stayed at a friend for a night. No calls, no messages from Andrew, but I got a voicemail. No number, just unknown. 30 seconds of breathing, then whispering. Then right before it ended, my own voice saying, "Let me back in." I hadn't said that. I came home the next day, planning to kick him out, tell him to pack up his 4 boxes and leave. But the boxes were gone. All that was left in his room was a circle of salt around the bed, symbols drawn in the carpet, charcoal, I think, or blood, and one last note: "Don't break the circle. She likes you. She might not stop at your name." I called the police. They found the room empty. No Andrew, no salt, no symbols, just an empty room with bare walls and cold air. They asked if I'd been drinking. That night, the knocking came again. 2:14 a.m., 3 soft knocks. I didn't move. Then I heard a voice right outside the door, high-pitched, childlike, trying too hard to sound friendly. "I have your name." It scratched at the wood. "I want to give it back." I didn't answer. At 3 a.m. on the dot, it stopped. The next morning, the hallway wall was covered in fingerprints, tiny, like a child's, burned into the paint. There was another note slipped under my door. "She's inside now. Don't let her out. She wears new faces. You won't recognize them until they smile." I haven't seen Andrew since. I don't think I ever really met him, but I hear the knocking every night, always at the same time, and always one knock closer. Story 4. I'm translating a book older than writing itself. Ancient humans were more advanced than us, and they predicted our downfall. I knew we were on the brink of a monumental discovery the moment I was invited to Athens to join the Narrated Research Collective. Before me, 5 researchers had begun the painstaking work of translating 3,030 obsidian tablets. They were all part of a single corpus, all written approximately 6,000 years ago. It didn't take long for them to realize that the scope of what they were translating was far grander than anybody could have imagined. So the original team of 3 classicists and 2 linguists quickly expanded into a group of 17 scientists, drawing experts from every corner of ancient history and the sciences. I joined as a paleoclimatologist, studying prehistoric climates. I suspected from the start that these tablets were something special. Ancient humans simply did not write on obsidian. Not only is it a nearly impossible material to work with, so hard it requires quartz or diamond to etch, yet so brittle a mere drop could shatter it. But the sheer scale of the corpus defied all precedent. We ran obsidian hydration dating no fewer than 5 times to be certain, and the results were undeniable. The tablets were inscribed between 4,300 and 3,800 BCE. For comparison, the earliest known Sumerian cuneiform is dated to around 3,200 BCE. Already, it was becoming clear we were facing what may well be the most significant discovery in human history. And the contents of these texts, collectively called the Book of Narrated, have only confirmed it. I should stop rambling, though. With the unanimous consent of the Narrated Research Collective, I am here to share with the world what we have learned. At this stage, we know what will happen once our translations are published. World governments, corporations, and intelligence organizations will try their best to suppress the findings and warnings of the children of Narrated. There is a warning repeated multiple times within these obsidian tablets that is intended for us. What we have learned bodes dire consequences for the human race unless we change our ways. And so we must share this message. You, too, would understand if you only open your mind to the breath. I promise it will make more sense soon. The pieces of knowledge I share will all come together at the end. But for you to understand the breath and the warning given to us, you must first understand what the Book of Narrated truly is. It all began when construction workers on the outskirts of Athens uncovered an ancient well, long sealed and buried beneath a mountain of earth. In accordance with protocol, the city of Athens' effort of antiquities was immediately notified, and construction work was halted. Archaeologists arrived on site and, after excavating the well, uncovered a passageway sealed with lead. Beyond was an ancient chamber filled with stone chests, each containing 100 obsidian tablets. They were all inscribed with a script unlike anything seen before. The real breakthrough came when another chest was discovered. This one held tablets written in both the unknown script and the linear syllabics of Mycenaean Greece. Though also carved into obsidian, these particular tablets were much newer, dating to around 1500 BCE. To their astonishment, the chests contained what could only be described as a dictionary. Thousands of words and even grammatical concepts carefully translated between the two languages. The find sent ripples of excitement through the academic community. For the classicists and linguists, this was by far the most sophisticated use of linear ever uncovered. It was at this point that the original team of 5 researchers was brought in. While they were unable to identify the older language outright, the dictionary gave them the tools to begin translating the tablets. Each fragment bore the words Book of Narrated at the top, followed by a sequential number, like a primitive Dewey Decimal Classification. The name stuck, and so the 5 researchers were tasked with translating some of the tablets, to see what information they contained. Unsure where to begin, they selected a fragment at random and set to work. From the very beginning, the contents of the Narrated corpus enthralled the researchers. At this time, they believed the tablets to be nothing more than ancient stories preserved on obsidian. They also learned that throughout the 5 centuries it took to compile the Book of Narrated, there were 10 chroniclers, never more than one at a time, each carrying the task of recording their world. One of the first fragments they translated told of a prophetess named Salur the Mar, who invented writing by carving words into obsidian with her bare hands. Other fragments described 7 secretive waterfalls where one could drink sealant in the Nepenthe of the mountains. The chroniclers wrote of a man who walked among the stars, and of a queen who saved her kingdom by condemning to death all those who dared speak a lie. The researchers kept translating. As they continued, a sense of awe began to settle over the team. The level of geographic knowledge contained within the Book of Narrated was unlike anything they expected from a people living 6,000 years ago. According to our best modern understanding, humans of that era were sparsely distributed, existing largely in isolation from one another, and yet the book spoke of no fewer than 15 distinct civilizations spread across the old world, all engaged in vibrant trade networks and existing together in peace. For instance, the Sealdine of the High Cliffs were said to dwell in the mountain valleys, in a vast range to the west of the children of Narrated. This could not be anything other than the Alps. The Kedarath of the Green Hills lived in a cool mountain climate beyond a vast desert, which can only be either the Ethiopian highlands or the Sarawak range of Yemen. And the Firewalkers were a people of the eastern highlands, likely situated in Anatolia or the rugged terrain of present-day Iran and Afghanistan. One of the more distant cultures mentioned were the people of the Sticky Grain, whose homeland, by every indication, lay within what is now China. But most astonishing of all were references to the people of the Obsidian Loom, an advanced civilization said to have thrived in the verdant mountains of what is now a vast desert to the south. By the time of the Book of Narrated, the civilization had already ceased to exist. This account aligns with the end of the African humid period, when the Sahara, once a fertile grassland, began to dry around 4500 BCE. The people of the Obsidian Loom, it is said, calmly emigrated from their homeland, their descendants dispersing and integrating into distant societies. It is likely they lived in the Tibesti Mountains of modern Chad. What interested the researchers even more, though, was that it seemed all these different civilizations had the same belief system. They all believed in something called the breath, a multifaceted concept. It was usually described as a life force animating the vessels that humans inhabit. At times, however, It was also portrayed as a natural ordering principle that connects all living beings and even inanimate matter. Rarely, it even appeared as a conscious deity, capable of communicating with people. The aforementioned prophetess, Salur of the Mar, supposedly invented writing after communicating with the breath. The linear B translation we had with us rendered the breath as pneuma, a Greek word that, in its religious sense, calls to mind the Chinese qi, the Sanskrit prana, and the ancient Egyptian concept of sikkim. In this way, the breath became the most enigmatic yet unifying concept in the entire Narrated corpus. After this point, it became clear that the original team of classicists and linguists was nowhere near enough. This was not a collection of fables and legends. It was an entire encyclopedia. Fragments described ancient trade networks, agricultural practices, medicinal knowledge, and more, necessitating the involvement of economic historians, paleobotanists, and zooarchaeologists. This is when I was invited to join, tasked with reconstructing the climate systems that shaped the world at the time the Book of Narrated was being compiled. As one of the leading paleoclimatologists in the world, it was an honor to be part of the Narrated Research Collective. Just as I said, I knew we would discover something that would forever alter the way we view our history. 2 days after my arrival and debriefing, we began translating the fragments in their sequential order. The Narrated version of the Dewey Decimal System, as we jokingly called it, numbered the fragments neatly, 1.01 through 1.100, 2.01 through 2.100, and so on. The final fragment, however, was numbered 30.30. The original 5 researchers had already translated its title and noted that, despite being the last in sequence, it appeared to serve as an introduction to the entire book. So we began there. It's important you understand that what you are about to read was written nearly 5,800 years ago. This is what the Book of Narrated is about. This is the fruit of our efforts. Fragment 30.30. If these words have found your eyes, then rejoice, for you hold in your hands the first weaving of all knowledge that ever walked upon clay and stone. I, Safford of the Narrated, have spent my life gathering the wisdom of countless generations to pour it into this vessel of obsidian. Here lies the fruit of ages, a record of the long dawn, a mirror of forgotten peoples, and a lamp for those who yet breathe in the fading days. In this tome is preserved the totality of our remembrance, the songs of the winds that first caressed man's cheek, the parables whispered by rivers long since swallowed by salt, the charts of sky as it danced in forgotten patterns, and the laws of breath which hold man in harmony. All that was, all that is, and all that shall yet stir in the loom of the unseen are written herein, not as fancy, but as truth drawn from the lips of the wise and the hearts of prophets. Know, O wanderer in the dust of centuries, that you and your kin are but shadows of what man once was, where now you measure life in fleeting decades, once we counted lifespans by centuries. In those days, the marrow of men burned strong, and their vessels endured the weight of centuries without bowing. Now you come to the world brittle of bone and shallow of breath, your hearts unmoored. Yet despair not, for within these pages lie the remedies for forgetting. Upon receiving wise counsel from Narrated, she proclaimed to me, "Write, Safford, for though the eyes of your age are growing blind, a day shall come when eyes long shut will open. They will find these words in the deep, and though they laugh at first, the breath will stir again in their chests, and the weaving shall begin anew. Therefore, though I know this chronicle shall lie buried in dust and stone, I write without sorrow. All unfolds as it must. Know, then, O seeker beyond the long dawn, that this chronicle was centuries in the making. 10 chroniclers bore its burden, scribes, weavers, singers, and elders now gone from this realm. I, Safford, am but the last chisel upon the obsidian stone. My vessel grows frail, my flame burns low, yet I rejoice. To have lived to complete this work is my greatest joy. When we finished translating that first tablet, a quiet fell over the room. We were still jubilant, still eager to continue, but seeing that accurate prediction on how the book would be rediscovered, as obvious as it may have seemed, carried with it a strange weight. It felt as though we were all meant to be there, assembled for some greater purpose. And who or what was Narrated, we would learn in the weeks to come. The stories that follow were among the richest and most intricate I have ever encountered. It is difficult even now not to digress into tangents about everything we uncovered. No one went to sleep plagued by strange dreams or visions, but we found ourselves working late into the night and beginning again early each morning, compelled by nothing more than our own excitement. As a paleoclimatologist, I was especially enthralled by the detailed accounts of climate. For the first time in human history, we had direct testimony of environmental conditions reaching as far back as about 4,500 BCE. It was a revelation that would forever change my field. After 2 months, we had progressed as far as fragment 9.45, occasionally skipping over certain groups of fragments that seemed less interesting. We agreed we would return to them later, whether it was a conscious decision or not. By some unspoken consensus, we were all searching for fragments that would reveal more insight into the breath. I expected my skepticism to grow over time. I expected there would come a moment when we encounter a claim so fantastical, so absurd, that it would shatter the illusion and confirm the Book of Narrated as nothing more than the embellished mythology of a long-forgotten civilization. Sometimes texts seem to deliver on this expectation. We read of the glass cities of Elthira, glittering in the desert, and the obsidian-hulled ships of Thalanari seafarers. Both feats that should be impossible even now, but that moment of disbelief never came. For we also encountered passages on the importance of washing one's hands before handling newborn children, detailed instructions for constructing pyramids, and ziggurats using techniques so advanced that even in Mycenaean Greek, they resisted easy translation. These fragments prove among the most technically difficult for us to translate, and we unanimously agreed that it must explain how the ancient Egyptians built their pyramids. The more we read, the more impressed we became with how comprehensive this encyclopedia was. There were even the words to hymns not sung in millennia, although different fragments did spark fierce debate within the Narrated Research Collective. Fragment 8.78 detailed the account of an ancient man who claimed the breath had lifted him beyond the skies, into a realm of darkness where stars surrounded him. From there, he observed what the Greeks would call the wanders of the sun, or planets. He claimed he saw a fifth one, large and stormy, with rings of dust and stone surrounding it. I argued passionately that it had to be factual, however supernatural it seemed. How could a pre-modern observer describe the rings of Saturn? They're invisible to the naked eye. I was backed by some of my colleagues, but others countered that it must have a more logical explanation. Perhaps it was a visionary dream, a poetic metaphor for spiritual ascent, or even a distorted memory of a solar eclipse. I became certain that there was some truth in the more fantastic claims of the Book of Narrated when we began working to the fragments concerning the sunken city of Athemidden. I will provide an excerpt from fragment 1.03, written by Anhar, the first chronicler. You will soon see how it is connected. The long dawn was an age of slow ripening. Bones did not bow beneath the weight of time, and teeth remained sharp even as the fifth generation of a man's children danced at his feet. Women bore sons of the 100th summer, and even then their hair was as dark as the obsidian stone which I write on. Men spoke then of elders who remembered the rising of great ice, and others who had seen the ice retreat. In those days, the breath within men burned brighter and endured longer, for it was untroubled by the poisons that now gnaw at flesh and marrow. This passage intrigued us beyond any other. It spoke of lives that stretched across centuries, where humans were smarter and healthier. The parallels were striking. The same motif echoes through Abrahamic scripture, Sumerian mythology, and Indian cosmology, all speaking of a time when humans lived longer lives and were closer, somehow, to the divine. The historians buzz with excitement. Could this ancient belief system be the source of all world myths, like the hundreds of flood stories? At the same time, we kept reading tablets that told of Athemidden. Fragment 1.87. The greatest of cities was Athemidden, whose gates of gold faced eastward to the morning star. This city felt the swelling of the waters, when the deep burst its bonds and devoured 1,000 valleys. Fragment 2.12. Oh, Athemidden, if I close my eyes, I see you still. Your streets like rivers of light. Your arches like the arms of repentance. Your temples mist clinging to my hair as my breath drinks deeply. Yet I open my eyes, and I see only ruin and silence. This is a poem by Lilith of Aram, who will be mentioned again later. Fragment 6.61. After Midden sank first, her pearl towers still glimmering as they fell beneath the waves. Villages in the lush coast said the cries of her people echoed in the hollow deep for 7 generations. Eventually, we came to fragments 9.45 and 9.46, the most detailed accounts we have of what happened to this sunken city. The story of After Midden goes like this. Founded during the long dawn in what was once a river delta, Manitoba raised a city of splendor. Its towers of pearl and emerald caught the light of the sun, casting rippling colors across canals. After Midden became a place where knowledge and trade converged. Travelers from every known civilization made their way to its gates. In an age when lifespans stretched into centuries, journeys that spanned decades were no obstacle. After Midden was not only a center of commerce, where goods from across the world were exchanged, but also a sanctuary of wisdom, for at its heart stood the Library of Memory. If we believe the Book of Narrated, the first library was not a collection of written texts. It was a sacred temple complex where reciters, each devoted to a specific discipline, could be approached to share the vast reservoirs of knowledge they held in their mind. With lifespans of 3, 5, or even 7 centuries, they could commit thousands of stories, histories, and discoveries to memory. We were in awe as we read these passages. Suspend your own disbelief for a moment and imagine, if humans lived for centuries, what depths of understanding might we achieve? How much oral tradition, how many innovations could be passed directly from one generation to the next? All of it compiled in a single international city that welcomed every major civilization at its gates. The Library of Memory was, every chronicler claimed, the greatest repository of human knowledge that ever existed. If real, I agree, the internet, with its forced advertisements and misinformation, could not come close. After Midden also contained the Temple of the Moist Breath, a structure of black stone in a city otherwise dazzling with light. Inside, seal and root burned as pilgrims washed their hands in water and circled a crystal said to hum with the breath. The chroniclers noted that it sang differently for each person who approached. But then came a boisterous noble who desecrated the temple. He questioned what good is life without revelry, and began a tradition of blood sports in the once hallowed halls of the temple. Brothers who lived for centuries together fought each other for amusement, their bodies strong enough to heal from even the worst wounds. After Midden descended into chaos. Foreign envoys recoiled in disgust, confining themselves to the markets or the library, which still endured. Even as the city rotted around it, its reciters remained steadfast, preserving what they could. In the end, the consequences for forgetting the breath and living in a corrupted state came. A deluge arrived, sudden and unbidden, like a bridegroom in the night. When the waters receded, only a few hundred, perhaps 1,000 at most, had survived, carried away on prepared vessels. Warnings had been given, but too few heeded them. Thus remained the memory of the sunken city of After Midden. After this, lifespans decreased to what they are today, though everybody alive at the time still lived long lives. As a paleoclimatologist, my mind leapt instantly to one thing, and one thing only: the Black Sea flood hypothesis. This hypothesis suggests that rising sea levels at the end of the last ice age caused the Mediterranean to breach the Bosphorus, catastrophically flooding what had once been a vast freshwater lake. Fertile coastlines and settlements disappeared beneath the waves, creating legends of great deluges that lingered for millennia. Taking an earlier fragment into account, the sinking of After Midden would have occurred around 6,500 BC, which is roughly the latest proposed date for what we now call the Black Sea flood. Could this be proof that this flood was real? Not only that, but could it also explain away 3 ancient legends with one obsidian stone? The sinking of Atlantis, an advanced city, the so-called Abrahamic Antediluvian period / Hindu Dvapar Yuga era, when humans supposedly lived impossibly long lives, and Noah's Ark, the great flood of Abrahamic tradition, where only a select few escaped on his vessel. By this point in our work, even the staunchest skeptics among us found their doubts eroding. The Book of Narrated was simply too detailed to dismiss as mere fiction. Of course, certain aspects, like centuries-long lifespans, could perhaps be exaggerations or misinterpretations. But having a reason given for those long lives made it feel somehow more real to me. The Book of Narrated claims humans wasted their extended years in a corrupted state by participating in blood sports and basking in idleness. The chroniclers also wrote that, with centuries to live, a person would hardly think twice about spending decades journeying to distant lands. And one would be able to commit to memory far more things with such a long lifespan, especially as it seems old age affected people less even when it did come. Regardless of my thoughts, every chronicler lamented the loss of the library of memory. They called it the single greatest loss of knowledge in all of human history. Gone were thousands of effective medical treatments, architectural techniques for building wonders we cannot replicate, and most importantly, countless methods for connecting to the breath. A handful of reciters survived because they had not been in Athemidden when the deluge struck. Some chose to pass on what they remembered, sharing fragments of their knowledge in the hope it might endure. But most took the disaster as a sign from the breath that such wisdom was not meant to survive. They wandered the earth until, one by one, their still long lives came to an end. The final piece of context you need to grasp the warnings of the Book of Narrated is the knowledge of the seers, of whom Narrated was one, despite its name and the fact it was written by the children of Narrated. Actual references to Narrated herself in the Book of Narrated were surprisingly scarce. They usually came as fleeting mentions noting that she had provided counsel, or that she had divulged the knowledge the chronicler is writing down. Yet every chronicler, from Anhar I to Safra X, spoke of her. For a time, we assumed Narrated was a title passed down through generations. Fragment 9.57 shattered that assumption, or rather, it complicated it. Narrated is not one woman but many. She dwells always in the form of an elder. When her vessel grows thin, her breath passes as smoke between reeds into another of her choosing. Thus she lives again and again, her memories braided into the loom of every vessel she inhabits. She walks freely between the breath and the clay, and from her lips we have gathered much of what fills these pages. A sort of reincarnation for sure, but not remotely similar to the kind mentioned in Buddhism or any other known belief system. It also seemed to apply only to Narrated and not to other humans. There was one exception, who I will mention soon. The tablet went on to explain that each vessel in Narrated rarely survived beyond a decade. Upon her passing, a new elder would wander into a village and declare herself as Narrated. This woman was always unknown to the world before her sudden appearance. The children of Narrated had even established a system for verifying her authenticity, though the details of the system were frustratingly vague. Most interestingly, it described how Narrated would inhale noxious vapors from a pit deep within a cave, granting her visions of some of what was, most of what is, and a bit of what will be. The classicists among us immediately drew parallels to Pythia, the oracle of Delphi, who, according to ancient Greek tradition, sat upon a tripod and inhaled vapors that allowed her to commune with the divine. It was a fascinating connection, but by the time of classical Greece, the oracle of Delphi had become more symbolic. Pythia was only a mediator for Apollo. Narrated's role, in contrast, seemed far more direct. Even more curious and unsettling was the fact that Narrated's acolytes would encase her in lead, leaving only her face exposed, and then lower her into the pool of fumes itself. This extreme act was reserved for times of greatest need, for it often killed her current vessel, and Narrated herself confessed that each successive vessel seemed frilier than the last. It was clear that the children of Narrated did not merely believe in seers and oracles. They had witnessed their abilities firsthand. Fragment 9.58 expanded on this, claiming the gift of prescience had once been widespread during the Long Dawn, but was decreasing as the centuries passed. It was decreasing because humans were losing their connection to breath. At that time, apart from Narrated herself, only a handful of seers remained. People would walk for years, even if they now only lived for mere decades, seeking their counsel. Among these surviving oracles was the enigmatic oracle of Nathalim, said to dwell in a nearly impenetrable jungle south of a vast desert. There was Kura, who lived among the Ketarath of the Green Slopes, a man known only as Crystal Eyes, whose home lay in the distant eastern mountains, and the Whispering Sisters of the Mar, who inhabited a swamp. Earlier fragments had also mentions of Ratham the Flame Bearer, who inhabited the eastern highlands, but by fragment 9.58, he was presumed dead after walking into a massive pyre and never returned. Apart from these, there were two seers in all of human history who stood apart from the rest. The first was Athura of the Loom, the last black weaver of the people of the Obsidian Loom. She was born with purple eyes, which were said to pierce the veil of our present and glimpse what lay beyond it, before leading her people out of their rapidly drying highland homeland. Athura wove and sealed a colossal tapestry. This tapestry contained within its intricate patterns the stories of hundreds, perhaps thousands, of events yet to unfold. It was her parting gift to a world she knew would forget her, but she always claimed that, even if the mountains become a barren and inhospitable wasteland, the breath would guide those who need to be guided to her tapestry, based on contextual clues from early fragments like 1.23, and also my own understanding of paleoclimatology. Athura was likely born in the Tibesti Mountains of Chad around 4,500 BC, not long before the Book of Narrated began its compilation. The second great seer was far more ancient, Akelos, seer of flames. Unlike Athura, he was a pyromancer who gazed into fire and saw vast spans of time, calamities and triumphs alike. He lived for 9 centuries, it is said, before vanishing without a trace, walking, perhaps, into his own prophecy. Even by the era of Athamiden's sinking, Akelos was already a legend of the deep past. Counting backward from the generations the chroniclers placed between him and our own time, we estimate Akelos lived sometime in the 9th millennium BC, dying around 8,000 BC. I have now shared with you the provenance of the Book of Narrated and what we know of the breath. You have glimpsed lost civilizations of which we have found no trace, and observed the extended lifespans of humanity before the sinking of Athamiden. Through these words, you have seen with your own eyes what became of the library of memory, and how oracles and seers shaped the world of these ancient people. And now, at last, you are ready to understand what the warnings contained within the Book of Narrated mean for us. Every seer and oracle, from Narrated herself to Athura of the Loom, foretold that humanity would one day forget the breath. They warned that we would wander the earth like empty vessels, aimless and hollow. This prophecy recurs again and again throughout the Book of Narrated. I could have chosen any one of dozens of fragments to share with you, but we, the Narrated Research Council, have unanimously chosen the one that stuck with us the most. It was written by Dathanar, the 4th chronicler and my personal favorite. For the fragment I am about to share, I must share the identity of Lilith of Aram. Apart from Narrated, he is the only known individual to have inhabited multiple vessels. He was but a youth when Athamiden was swallowed by the deluge, escaping aboard one of the few surviving vessels. For years he wandered the world, lost in grief for all that humanity had known and lost. But in time, Lilith claimed he found a purpose. He withdrew from the world, living as a recluse, though occasionally he emerged to share his wisdom. Each time he died, he returned in a new vessel, and each time he retained the extraordinary lifespans of the Long Dawn. He provided stories and counsel to each of the first 4 chroniclers. The fragment I am about to share with you was his final contribution before disappearing from the world forever. Fragment 10.14, as set down by Dathanar, 4th of the chroniclers. I, Dathanar, bearer of the obsidian stylus and servant to the breath's whisper, now lay forth what Lilith of Aram confided to me in his last season of strength. For among all the gifts he passed to the Book of Narrated, this final utterance weighed most heavily upon him. It was after the wailing of Athamiden had fallen into silence that Lilith of Aram began wandering this world, lamenting all that was lost. One eve, as he stumbled through the eastern highlands, Lilith saw in the distance a vast and steady blaze that crowned the plateau like a second sun, defying the moonless night. Compelled as though pulled by the breath's own hand, Lilith drew nearer. At the pyre's base stood a figure, tall and robed in gray. To Lilith's astonishment, it was a certain reciter of the second circle who had once spoken to Lilith deep within the library of memory. He was one of the few reciters to survive the sinking of Athamiden. But now there was no library, no halls of obsidian, only the night and the fire. The reciter spoke. You have walked long, Lilith of Aram, long enough that your vessel grows weary, and your breath strains to hold it. We are both here by the design of the breath. We are both here by the design of Akalos, the seer of flames. They sat together in silence as the flames roared. They consumed nothing, yet were continuously replenished. Lilith did not ask what fuel fed it, but in its glow he saw the figures of men and women, their faces twisted in both ecstasy and torment. Finally, the reciter spoke again. Lilith of Aram, you will be the last ember of Athermidden. One day, when you must depart this plane of existence, the time will come for you to share the knowledge of what I tell you. This knowledge was given to Akalos in his last days, as he bowed to the breath of a pyre even bigger than this one. It is not a gift I give you lightly, nor one you may lay down once taken. Lilith responded, if I do not carry this final ember, I will wander a hollow vessel. The reciter spoke solemnly. So be it. He began to tell how, after the deluge consumed Athermidden and the library of memory drowned in silence, he too wandered. Eventually, he found a wide chasm that called to him. Down he climbed until he emerged at the bottom. He continued onwards until he eventually discovered an ancient stone door marked in glyph, so old they predated even the 10 poisons as written by prophetess Salur of the Mar. Beyond lay the cavern aglow with crimson flame from torches that looked unnatural. At the center lay Akalos, seer of flames. The seer's body was embalmed with such skill that even millennia later his flesh bore no rot. Around him stood thousands of sealed capsi, some of obsidian, some of crystal, each humming faintly. In a corner, the reciter found a capsa that matched his hum, and so he took it. Upon it were written glyphs. These are the words of Akalos. Though his lips had been still for millennia, his voice now breathed into Thora's, the reciter of the second circle. Greetings, Thora's, son of Raphanal. Though you and I have never met in the flesh, I knew you would come, for the breath showed me your face long before your vessel was ever formed of clay and dust. I know the weight upon your shoulders, the lament that fills your heart at the loss of the library of memory. You weep for its drowning, and I weep with you. I wish that the library could truly be eternal, but nothing is, not even the flesh of seers, only the breath. So I speak from beyond the veil, though my vessel lies still and hollow. You, Thoras, will now hold what I saw, what I carried. I will ask only a little of you, and in return I will leave you with knowledge. Thoras, the grand pyre showed me my place in the weaving of time. I am but one thread, yet I was marked to burn brighter than most. The breath granted me prescience greater than any before, and it is by its design that I must use my abilities to warn the breathless humans of what is to come. My work was not yet done when my vessel first withered. I retreated here, to this final resting place, where I gazed into my pyres until my eyes no longer saw and yet saw still. I left messages for those who would dare the descent, for those whose breath would guide them to these words. Through my pyres I learnt tongues that would not be spoken for millennia, and etched these glyphs you now read, though they mean nothing in my time. The future is not fixed, but most paths end in darkness. I have seen humanity rise and then crumble. You see it even in your time. Man is forgetting the breath. Centuries after your time, humanity will fall into an age of darkness you cannot imagine. You would weep if you saw into my flames. In the ages to come, they will sever their bond with the earth that bore them. Forests will fall, their roots torn up and their canopies burned away. Rivers will run thick with poisons, until even the smallest fish float lifeless upon their surfaces. Great herds that once roamed in freedom will dwindle to nothing, their bones bleaching under sunless skies. The air itself will grow heavy and sour, no longer fit to draw into one's lungs. In place, they will build towers of glass that scrape the sky, but their souls will remain hollow vessels. Their cities will be consumed by endless seas of metal beasts which choke the breath. They will rediscover the importance of washing with water, and consider themselves advanced for learning to stretch their lifespans mere decades beyond their forebears. Yet never again will they live centuries. People will declare themselves masters over their neighbors, waging wars of fire and iron to erase them. And though they will grasp at knowledge with desperate hands, they will forget the breath that once granted it. But among all these paths, one alone leads true, a path where, in the far future, the breathless humans awaken and return to the way of the breath. They will cast aside their monuments of glass and steel, and live in harmony with the living earth once more. The forests will be reborn, the rivers will run clear, and even the winds will sing with renewal. Their homes will blend with the land like moss upon stone, and they will take no more than the earth is willing to give. No beast will fear their footfalls, for they will walk as keepers, not conquerors. They will respect one another, and once again, a noble will smile at a farmer, for they live as neighbors. In this way, the breath may yet flow freely through all things again. There are roles to play for all to succeed. Each who enters this chamber holds a thread. Some threads are small, others monumental, but all are needed to weave the pattern. Some will fail. When they do, others will be called to their place. The breath chooses and calls each in its own time. Even now, it calls to you, Thoras. You are not the first to stand here, and you will not be the last. Your task is simple but important. You must find Lilith of Aram once more and set him upon his path. He is the last ember of After Midden. He will wander in vessels of clay and dust, lifetime after lifetime. But on his final breath, he will know. He must seek this chamber and perform one last deed. If he takes your words to heart, it may yet be that my message to you reaches even breathless humans. Lilith finished his recitation. And so it was Dathanar that I understood my place. I am the last ember, and my time approaches. I have lived lifetimes upon lifetimes, but this vessel will be my final. Tomorrow I depart for the Eastern Highlands to seek the chamber and fulfill the breast's design. Thus I, Dathanar, have set down this account from Lilith of Aram, the last ember of the sunken city of After Midden. I have no words for what we found in Fragment 10.14. None of us do. We translated it last week, and for 3 days afterwards, the entire team sat in silence. 10,000 years ago, a pyromancer spoke before writing even existed. And now, against all odds, you are reading his words. He hoped his message would survive the ages to reach the breathless humans, the ones who build towers of glass, who choke the world with cars, who plunge the earth for profit and cannot stop waging war. That message was meant for us. There are no skeptics left among us. The Book of Nanada is fact. It is warning. It is plea. Humanity must realign itself with the breath, or all paths will converge on ruin. This is not some trite, anticlimactic environmentalist moral tack onto the end of the story. It is the single most important truth we have ever uncovered, and we will not pretend to have answers. But this much is clear. This information must be shared. The world needs to see it. Every single human being needs to read these words. Perhaps, somewhere out there, there are still those who remain connected to the breath. Perhaps now they will feel the courage to step forward and teach the rest of us what we have forgotten. Or perhaps this is all in vain, and one of the many dark paths for humanity will be chosen. But that pathway will not just affect us. It very well may destroy the entire planet alongside us. We of the Nanada Research Collective choose not to believe in despair. We choose to believe in the faint, stubborn light of humanity's better nature. We choose to believe there is still time. Story 5. There was a light outside my window. I know there was. Having a bedroom in the basement has its perks. For one, nobody really bothers you down there, so you're unlikely to be bothered if you're trying to relax. It's always cool in the basement. And if you're anything like me, you prefer to sleep in a cooler room. So no matter how hot it is upstairs, your room always feels just right. Sure, it can feel a little creepy at times, but when I was 17, I was really lucky. My basement bedroom at the time had a window. It was one of those basement rooms where the window poked out just above the surface. During the day, it let in plenty of light, and at night, you could see the trees silhouetted by the light of the moon outside. It was a great room. I think it might have been the nicest I'd had up until that point. My bed was in a perfect position to look out the window while I would fall asleep, and the paint job of the room made it feel bright and spacious. White, but not a stark, austere white. Almost a creamy color. Everything began one night in the early spring of my grade 11 year. I had been going to sleep the same as always, about 11:30 at night, falling asleep to a YouTube video on my phone. I had school the next morning. So the video was something I wouldn't want to stay up for. I think it was a top 10 list, something mundane enough to put me out like a light. As my eyes closed, I could feel sleep starting to take me over. Normally you wouldn't notice that moment. It would just happen. And then you'd be asleep. But in the exact moment I was about to slip into unconsciousness, something grabbed my attention. There was a flashing light, faint white and blinking. I sat up, thinking it was some annoying ad on my phone. But when I looked at my phone, I saw that the video I'd been watching had just ended, no ad, and now my phone screen was dark. The only light in my room was the one flashing, and that seemed to be outside my window. I figured it was just a car driving by. Traffic was light on the street where I lived, but not unheard of. No, that wasn't it. The tree line between the yard and the road would have made the light choppier. And it was going on for too long, too rhythmically. I sat like this for maybe a few minutes, looking up at my window in confusion. I decided to get up to look out the window, to properly see what the light was. I was dazed, my mind foggy from having been nearly asleep. I can assure you, though, I was wide awake when I realized it. The light didn't seem to be coming from anywhere specifically. It was just some flashing point in the distance, outside my window, at the very edge of the bottom. The yard began, a large expanse of grass ending at the tree line. The light seemed to be coming from the very edge of the trees, as if from something laying on the ground. I couldn't see what from, though. Whenever the light would go dark during the course of its blinking, I would try my best to see where it could have been coming from. I thought maybe someone had dropped a flashlight, and it had set itself to strobe when it fell. Why the owner would not have picked it up, though, was beyond me. It was too dark to see anything well when the light would blink off, so I couldn't tell what was there. The moon was glowing outside, but it was too faint to make anything out. If I had owned any curtains, I would have closed them, but I had never wanted any before, so I didn't. I always complained that if I had curtains, my room would have felt like a coffin buried under the earth. 10 minutes passed like this, and the light showed no sign of letting up. I decided that I would investigate in the morning, but for now, I needed to sleep. I went back to bed and pulled the covers over me to shield myself from a flashing light outside. It took a while, but eventually I did finally manage to sleep. It wasn't restful sleep, nor was it a very deep sleep. It was as if I spent the whole night in a strange state of being half awake, half asleep. When I woke up the next morning, the sun was shining. I got up and looked out the window, and didn't see any sign of the light source. I got up and prepared for school that day, brushing my teeth and eating a few bites of some oatmeal before heading out the door to catch my bus. As I left, though, I paused. My father was there working in the family room on his computer. I asked him if there had been a light outside the night before, one that might have woken him up. He said nothing had woken him, but that it was likely nothing whatever had been. I went to the spot where the light had been the night before, pushing through the tall grass at the edge of the trees to see if there was anything there. But I couldn't find anything. That's when I finally started to feel a little uneasy. I couldn't explain it, but something felt off about the whole thing. The light hadn't been particularly bright, but I knew it had been there. I left the tree line, going back to the driveway, and walking up to where the street was, I saw I had gotten there just in time for the bus. I didn't mention to anyone at school. After all, I had no real reason to be uneasy about the light I had seen. There was likely a reasonable explanation. The rest of the day went by without anything of note happening. Classes, lunch with friends, a pop quiz in history. I got back home around 3 that day and went to my room to do homework. I was starting to feel better about the night before, figuring it to have just been a dream, or at least if it was real, something unimportant. As the darkness of night arrived, though, my concern was awakened. I held off going to my room that night, till I knew I had to go to bed. To try and sleep, I put on another video, something light and cheery, sure to let me drift into sleep with peaceful, happy thoughts. It took a long time, though. It must have been 1 in the morning when I could finally feel sleep claiming me. Just like the night before, though, just on that edge between awake and asleep, the light started again. I got up immediately from my bed and looked out. It was closer now, halfway across the yard, pointing directly at my window. This time, I felt truly frightened. I had no idea what this was, if it was some kind of prank or what. But I didn't feel safe. I ran upstairs to my father's room, which was on the same side of the house as my room was, and woke him up. At first he seemed annoyed, but as I explained he realized how upset I was, and got up to check outside his own window to see if anything was there. He pulled his curtains aside and looked out into the now pitch-black night. Nothing was there now, and he tried to comfort me, saying it was some kind of crazy nightmare. I reluctantly went back to bed, and the light was no longer there. As I laid down, though, it flashed once before going out for the rest of the night. I didn't sleep at all. I got up, got dressed, and went to school. I made my dad take me to buy curtains that afternoon. That night, I drew the thick shades closed and laid down once more to try and sleep. No YouTube for me this time. I felt sleep coming over me, and in that moment I felt the briefest of reliefs, thinking I would finally sleep properly. That's when the scratching started. It was subtle, quiet, almost as if it was not there, but it was there and was enough to wake me up fully. I jolted upright in my bed, head pointed at the covered windows. It was a slow, agonizing sound, like nails slowly dragging down a chalkboard. Every few seconds it would stop, presumably having reached the end of the window, only to start up again. I felt sick to my stomach. My head was pounding as fear slowly gave way to terror. I had to think of something. If the night before had taught me anything, I knew going to my father would do nothing. I stood up slowly and turned on the light in my room. Once the light was on, the scratching continued, but now there was a thumping. It was as if when whatever was making that noise would begin again, from the top of the window now. It would thrust its hand at the window, banging it before dragging itself down again. Of course, guessing it was a hand was just me trying to guess. I had no real way of knowing what was out there. In a moment of clarity, I decided I needed to know what was out there. I reached out before I could convince myself otherwise and opened the curtain. Whatever had been making that sound was gone, replaced now by only the blinking light. It was closer now, the light directly outside my window, and with every blink, it now shone so brightly that the world around it disappeared. I went to grab my phone, only to find that it was dead now, the charging cord seemingly having been knocked out of port. That ruled out filming it. As the light continued to flash, a thought crossed my mind. I grabbed a notebook and began writing. I was recording the length of each flash. Perhaps it was Morse code or something. Either way, I couldn't just sit here and watch it again. I needed to start being proactive. I took note of the flashes for maybe an hour. I had lost all sense of time. My phone was plugged in now, but it wasn't charging for some reason. I didn't care now anyway. I had decided that whatever this thing was, it didn't want others seeing it, and was making sure I couldn't use my phone to show anyone. I must have passed out at some point during that, because I woke up suddenly and realized it was light out now, the flashing object having left. I looked down and realized that I must have gotten a lot taken down in the book that night, as I flipped through page after page of dots and dashes. It was a Saturday, so I didn't have to go to school that day. I grabbed my phone and saw that it had finally charged. I took to Google, looking up a Morse code translator online. I found one easily enough and began inputting what I had jotted down the night before. It took me an hour. There were so many dots and dashes. Most of them were highly repetitive, but I wasn't risking missing anything I had seen. When I had finished, I hit enter, and the program began translating it into text. I could feel the blood leaving my face as I saw what it said. New friend, new friend, new friend. It just repeated over and over. New friend, new friend, new friend. I began to tremble violently. I felt like I was losing my mind. At that moment, my father knocked on my door. He opened the door and saw me sitting there, my phone in my hand, and I realized tears were streaming down my face. He looked down at the phone screen and saw what it said. He looked at me, concern in his eyes. We went upstairs and talked about it. He still thought it was a dream, but figured either way, whatever was going on, I couldn't sleep downstairs for now. I had tried to convince him it wasn't a dream. It was real. He was not convinced, and the harder I tried to make him believe me, the more concerned for me he got. It was a solemn day. I was drained, but I wasn't able to sleep. I just sat there, staring at my phone, reading the message over and over again. My dad went into his room, making some phone calls. I know they were about me. That night, my dad set up the couch for me in the living room. It was on the main floor of the house, the upstairs being only an attic. If he had let me, I would have slept up there for the night, as far from the basement as possible. I lay down and closed my eyes, trying to sleep. Obviously, it was not going to be an easy task, especially because I needed to keep all the lights on. There was no way I was going to sleep in the dark that night. It must have been about 2 in the morning now when I started drifting off to sleep. This time I actually went to sleep, but it was short-lived. It was the scratching that woke me up now. I sat up slowly, only to panic when I realized I was back in my room. I scrambled to my door, trying desperately to open it, but it wouldn't budge. The door refused to swing outward and release me. It was as if something on the other side was blocking it. The scratching was still there, rhythmic and haunting. I was crying now, barely able to see through my tears. Hysteria was growing inside of me, and I ran to the curtains, ripping them off the wall as I screamed now at whatever was outside. The window behind the curtains was lower now, and instead of sitting on the edge of the grass, it was now below the soil. By the light of my bedroom, I could see the dirt behind the glass of my window pane and the hand that came out of it. The hand jutted out from the dirt, pushing soil aside around it as it lifted itself up to the top of the window to drag mud-caked fingernails down my window. I curled up on the ground, rocking back and forth, going between sobbing uncontrollably and screaming at the top of my lungs. As the hand scratched at my window, the light in my room started blinking out that same cursed message from the night before. New friend, new friend. It felt like days passed like this, me rocking and panicking, the hand scratching and the light blinking. The rhythm never changed. The same cursed message blinking in light. The same slow scratching against my window. My voice grew hoarse, turning to a raspy wheeze of dread as I lay there, my eyes trying, failing to close tight enough to prevent seeing the light go on and off. I must have passed out eventually. When I woke up, my father was shaking me, holding back tears as he looked down at me. I could see in the reflection of his glasses. I was covered in dirt. We moved out shortly afterward. We had to. With the cost of my therapist, we couldn't afford the rent there. We moved into a small apartment in the city. It was on the 12th floor of the building, high above the ground. It wasn't very nice, but it was cheap. Luckily for me, it is very far from the basement of the building. My therapist has tried to diagnose me. They throw all sorts of terms around, but I never really listen. I know it was real. I know it was. I still sleep with my lights on. From time to time, I wake up outside of the door to the basement downstairs, seemingly stopped from going down only by the sturdy padlock on it. I am afraid that one day the padlock will not stop me, that one day I will be under the earth once again with whatever thing outside my window was attached to that vile hand, looking for its new friend. Story 6. I was tired of being a lazy writer, so I hired a hitman to kill me if I didn't reach my page count. I found him on Craigslist. The ad's description was short and to the point. Too lazy? Death motivates. Hire a personal hitman for $100 per month to meet your goals. No refunds. No cancellations. I thought it was funny. At first, there was a whole profile page for the guy. He was bald, had a squash nose. His eyes were like tiny pinpricks in his thick face. Piggy eyes. His ears were cauliflowered out, big and swollen. He kind of looked like a cartoon character, made out of flesh. The strangest bit, he was smiling. I didn't think hitmen were supposed to do that. His upper and lower lips were drawn into a soft, knowing smile, like there was some old joke between us that he was remembering. It would have been comforting. If I had known what the joke was. He creeped me out, but I was intrigued. I'm a writer, and to be honest, I've always been a little lazy. It comes down to a problem I've been dealing with most of my life. Let me paint a picture. On any day of the week, I'll go to my computer and sit down to write. I have every intention of finally doing it. Finally getting to that one scene I've been going over my head for weeks. I'd open up the document, stretch my fingers and wiggle them around to warm them up. Then I stare at the blank page for 10 seconds, 30 seconds. I blink, and somehow it's 30 minutes later, and I'm balls deep in Diablo 2. I was a mess, but I knew that if I had the proper motivation, I could finish my book. It's a book I've been working on for the past 5 years, a swashbuckling mystery romance historical musical with inspiration from Faulkner. Its use of ska really embellishes its themes, but every time I would make progress on it, I'd get distracted again. My window of opportunity was closing. I wasn't in high school anymore. Adult things like taxes and insurance were pressing down on me. The imminent loss of my freedom was closing in on all sides, making my brain claustrophobic. I knew if I didn't get this done now, I'd be stuck waiting tables at the Golden Corral TM for the rest of my life. Everywhere I went, the smell of mac and cheese cheapsteak and old people past their expiration date hung in a curse miasma around me. Even after a decade working there, I had never gotten used to that combo. I needed professional help. I gathered my courage and responded to the ad. I got confirmation of the contract and was asked what I wanted my weekly goal to be. I took a while to settle on a number. I had to make it a reasonable one. That's just good goal setting. Third letter in SMART, attainable. I decided 10 pages was a good amount to start with. At the time, I thought it was odd that the hitman didn't ask me my address or phone number, but I didn't question it too much. He was the expert here, not me. I sent off the email, and a bubble of nervous gas knotted itself in my lower intestine. Anxiety cramps. I drank some Pepto and tried to relax. I reminded myself I wasn't doing anything dangerous. I was just getting my ass into high gear. I was going to be fine. That first week, I was motivated. I finished my 10 pages in 3 days. I sent them off to my goal consultant at midnight on Wednesday. I was triumphant, like Sir Gregor in the medieval portion of my musical book, when he had taken out a horde of space zombies with Iron Age tech. The jazz saxophone solo was a lot of fun to write. After a few minutes, I got a notification on my phone, a response email from my hitman. It was a thumbs up emoji. I relaxed. I didn't even realize I was tense. Looking back, I might have spent too much energy on that first week, because the next week was a lot slower. By the time Thursday rolled around, I only had about 4 pages. That night, I was sitting at my computer, making weird noises with my mouth and pretending I was a professional drummer when I noticed something on my wall. It was a small red dot. It looked like it was some kind of laser pointer. It was weirdly steady, jiggling a bit here and there, almost like a little heartbeat. I stared at it for a long time, trying to figure out what it was. The anxiety cramps came back, bubbling in my gut like a dormant volcano. I told myself it was some weird neighborhood kid playing with their new laser pointer. I went back to goofing off, even though pains in my lower stomach were growing sharper. A minute later, the doorbell rang. I went to get it, and on the doormat was an envelope. It was pristine and unmarked, which was weird. I picked it up and shook it. It seemed to have only a piece of paper inside. I opened it up, pulled out the paper, and read it. 3 days. It took a moment for me to get it. Was this a joke? Was the gas company mad at me again for not paying my bills 3 months in a row? Then I remembered the hitman I had hired. I almost laughed out loud. I had completely spaced. Whoever this guy was, he was good. I took the letter inside and went back to my computer. The red dot was a few inches closer to my screen than it had been before. I started typing. I finished my 10 pages on Friday. Again, I was filled with feelings of victory. Just like Tsar Brian, the time-traveling Russian, when he saves Abraham Lincoln from a cyborg John Wilkes Booth. Another beloved scene from my book. I sent in the pages to the hitman. The red dot was still on my wall. still trembling with a strange regularity that made my chest clench up. The response email arrived. Another thumbs up. When I looked back at it had disappeared. I sighed, and my anxiety cramps went from an 8 out of 10 to a 4. I re-upped my subscription at the end of the month. It was hard to argue with the results. I had written more in a week than in the last 2 years combined. It was working. Besides, a large part of me didn't really think he was going to kill me. That would be illegal in my moments of doubt. I told myself someone would stop him if it ever came to that. But a small part of me wasn't so sure. The next 2 weeks, I met my goals no problem. I think it was because I had nailed the letter I had gotten to my wall. Every time I glanced over at it, I felt my fingers move faster on the keyboard. They shook with an eagerness I had never felt before. I kind of loved the rush. The next week, I ran into a bit of writer's block. There was a romance scene between a reanimated George Washington and a sexed-up Jimmy Carter that wasn't coming together for me. It was a pivotal moment in my book, basically the climax, and I couldn't move past it. On Friday, I only had 1 page written. That was when I started to get worried. At first, I tried to fudge the system. I typed in a whole bunch of random words to make it look like I had written 10 pages. When I pressed the send button, my stomach felt like it was full of knives. 2 minutes later, the response email arrived. It had only 2 words. Nice try. I couldn't fake my way out of this. I stayed up all that night at my computer, trying out every sort of idea in my head. I was blocked up both in my gut and in my brain. By the time the sun rose the next morning, I still only had 1 page written. I had also downed an entire bottle of Tums to try and soothe my stabbing stomach. It didn't work. I had limited writing time on Saturday since I was working a double at the corral. I had bills to pay. I was desperate enough to ask my co-workers for help with the romance scene. The only help I got was creepy Tommy pulling me into the bathroom to watch gay porn. I stayed until the end of the video so I wouldn't hurt his feelings. I was the last one left in the restaurant when it came time to close up. I was wiping throw up off a table from an 80-year-old's birthday party when I felt my gut suddenly seize up again. It was so bad, I bent double. As I tried to keep from adding the vomit on the table, I felt my back tingle, little ripples and spasms that made me shiver all over. Someone was watching me. I turned around slowly, holding my stomach. My hitman was standing at the door. My heart stopped. He was tall and large in an almost fake-looking way. He was so still, it was easy to think he was actually made of plastic. His body rippled with muscles in a way that was grotesque and unreal, like pulsing animals underneath his skin. His face looked exactly like his profile picture. Piggy eyes, a soft chin, the small smile, so knowing, so unnerving. I felt vomit rise to the back of my throat again. The street lamp cast a sharp glare off his bald head that hurt my eyes. My knees went slack, and I braced myself against the table. I felt my hand touch throw up, but I didn't care. I tried to control my breathing, but it was like trying to stop a runaway train with one hand. Pointless. My hitman stared at me for a long time. He didn't blink. He didn't flinch. I wanted to cry. He moved, and I jumped about 10 feet in the air. I also pissed my pants. After my body was done spazzing, I realized he wasn't trying to attack me. He had only moved one of his arms in front of him, his pointer finger sticking up towards the sky, straight and still. He mouthed something I couldn't hear through the glass. I tried to read his lips. It took a few seconds. One day, he said it 3 times. He smiled a little wider. Then he turned around and walked into the night. I didn't even finish cleaning up. I ran out the door, got into my car, and went home as fast as I could. I almost crashed 3 times. Eventually, I pulled into my parking spot, leapt out, and sprinted to the front door. I fumbled with the keys for a moment. Every second counted, and my sausage fingers were wasting them. After a bit of effort, I got the tumblers to turn, and I slammed open the door. I got inside, locked it, and pounded upstairs to my computer. I booted it up, not even taking time to change my pants. I started writing. I tried, I really did. By the time Sunday morning came around, I had 3 pages. I had broken down and used some of the stuff Creepy Tommy showed me, but I had to delete it. It didn't feel right for Jimmy Carter to say things like that, sexed up or not. At one point I got so desperate, I called the police, but they stopped talking to me the minute I mentioned my contract. Thought it was some kind of practical joke. Also, I might have spent a bit too much time describing my book. I couldn't help it. I needed to practice my elevator pitch. I barricaded myself in my room. I locked the doors, put stuff up on the windows, anything to buy me time. I watched YouTube videos about writer's block while I worked. When that didn't help, I switched to rom-coms. At one point, I was watching 3 different films all at once at 2 times speed. I was also blasting the audiobook of A Court of Thorns and Roses on a portable speaker. The hours ticked by. When it was 2 hours to midnight, I had my breakthrough. Halfway through Jerry Maguire. It was so simple. The scene needed Tom Cruise, and it needed him bad. The third member of the throuple. The person who ties them all together. I went to the page and started typing. An hour passed. 1 hour to midnight. I was at 5 pages. I did the math in my head and knew that I had to type faster. I focused on the story, not the smaller mistakes. As I typed, I let the typos build up to a pile the size of a mountain. Every thought I put on the page. I let myself go on to tangents, explain things in long and circuitous ways. I could fix that in revision, and it wasn't half bad if I say so myself. Half an hour to midnight. 7 pages. As I typed, I heard something shift behind me. Was something in my closet? For a moment I paused, then I got back to work. I didn't have time to check. I kept writing. I stretched out a conversation about what date the 3 were going to go on just so it could buy me another page. 10 minutes. 9 pages. I heard another noise behind me. I knew I shouldn't have looked. I knew I should have ignored it. But I ended up wasting 30 seconds of my precious time to glance behind me. At first, I didn't see anything. My room was empty, illuminated by my desk lamp with a strangely flat orange light. Then, I caught a flash from a dark corner. I saw him. He was peeking out of the closet. A sliver of his face was visible, that same half-smile pulling on his cheeks. Was his smile wider now? The door pushed open at a snail's pace, and there he was. He emerged from the closet like some biblical giant, shoulders hunched and head bent so as not to brush the ceiling. My heart froze. He had gotten taller. He saw me staring at him, and his teeth became visible as his lips pulled back. His mouth was so terrifying. It took a while for me to realize that he was not baring his incisors at me like a wild animal. He was grinning. My heart was flush with adrenaline, and I pushed onward. I didn't want to die. I didn't want to die. I wrote and wrote and wrote. So many typos. So many lines of cheesy dialogue. I might have even plagiarized lines from 50 First Dates. Adam Sandler was with me, even in the face of death. 5 minutes, a little more than half a page left. With each minute, I could feel the thud of my hitman's footsteps as he took another step towards me. I instinctively looked backward and saw he had nothing in his hands. That didn't make me feel better. My imagination grew wild with all he could do to me with those positively huge hands, with his strangely long fingers. The digits were tensed, ready to grab, to smash, to do something horrible to me that would leave me broken and mangled on the floor. I saw it all and knew it would happen to me with the certainty of a prophet. I typed furiously, my fingers aching with the effort. Half a page, a quarter, an eighth. The hitman continued to advance. I slammed my index finger on the period button. Done. 1 minute to midnight. 10 pages. I took a breath. I had finished. I turned to face the hitman. He raised his eyebrows slightly at me, still grinning. A horrifying realization hit me. I still had to send the email. My fingers slid along the buttons like I was drunk. 20 seconds left. I dragged the wrong file. I didn't even try to delete it. I just kept dragging until the correct one fell into place. 10 seconds. I typed in the hitman's email address, and I felt his breath on my neck. It was hot. It burned. Sweat poured down my nose. 5 seconds. I missed the send button on my first click. 2 seconds. I lined up my mouse with the paper airplane. 1. I hit send and backed away from the computer. I huddled in the corner, staring at the hitman, my arms held out protectively in front of me. The hitman stared back, still grinning, his arms held slightly forward and his fingers crooked in midair, reaching towards me. A buzz came from his pocket. He reached in his pocket and pulled out a phone. His grin faded back to a smile. He scrolled for a moment. I didn't move. For 10 minutes, I watched him read. Finally, he looked up at me. I could see his brow crease down. I held my breath. He raised his hand, and I closed my eyes. When I didn't feel him throttling me, I peeked out my closed lids. His fingers were pulled into a fist, and his thumb was pointed straight into the air. A thumbs up. I threw up all over the carpet. What felt like a full knife block was rolling around in my stomach. I was vaguely aware of the hitman leaving the room and closing the door with a click. His footsteps were so soft. That was the last straw. I couldn't handle it anymore after that. I sent an email letting him know I was canceling the subscription and his services would not be required. I hoped he would understand. I didn't get anything back. I laid in bed for 3 days. At least, I think I did. I'm not sure. I kind of blacked out a bit. It's been a week, and I've started to regain my bearings. I don't jump at every small noise anymore. I do find myself looking over at my closet a lot. Sometimes, I think I see eyes peeking in at me. But every time I go check, nothing's there. It's Sunday again. I got an old notification from my phone telling me to submit my 10 pages. A part of me wants to stay up and write just to be safe. But I'm just paranoid. I need a bit more rest. Story 7. They told us to stay inside. We should not have listened. The weekend it all began, I was completely disconnected. I decided to stay home, away from my phone, social media, everything. Just me, the couch, hot coffee, and the sound of soft rain against the window. Red Pine Falls was always like that on weekends. Quiet, a bit forgotten, moving at its usual slow pace. I lived in an old apartment building, the kind that felt stuck in time. My neighbors were easygoing folks. The lady in 104 walked her dog every morning. The kid from B13 was always skateboarding in the parking lot. A couple down the street would fight loudly, but always made up the next day. It was Sunday when I saw the alert. I didn't hear a sound. I just noticed a shift in the living room light, like something had flickered. I looked at the TV, which was off, and had turned on by itself. The screen displayed a red background with static white letters. Emergency alert. Do not leave your home. Remain disconnected. Avoid windows. Await instructions. I grabbed my cell phone by reflex. It showed the exact same message. Same color, same font. No sound, no sirens, no explanation. Just that text. My first reaction was to laugh. It seemed like a system error. Maybe a poorly programmed test. The government often runs simulations, right? Especially in small towns like ours. But when I tried to change the channel, the TV froze. The power button didn't work. My phone also froze. The screen flickered, then went back to the alert. I restarted it, but the same warning reappeared, as if it were imprinted on the system itself. I looked out the window, expecting to see some movement, some collective response. But everything was the same. A few lights on in the surrounding buildings, but no one on the street. Not even the sound of the lady calling her dog, or the skateboarder, or the couple arguing. Just a thick silence, as if the world was holding its breath. I went back to the couch, phone still in hand. I tried to open any app, but nothing worked. Everything was frozen. I turned on the old radio on the shelf. As soon as it powered up, the announcer's voice was interrupted. and the same alert phrase began to repeat like a soft, emotionless mantra. Do not leave your home. Remain disconnected. Avoid windows. I switched it off immediately. From that moment on, everything in me wanted to say it was just a technical glitch, a coincidence, but something was wrong. Very wrong. The next morning, the first thing I noticed was the silence. Not a common silence. It was something heavier, as if sound had been drained from the town. Even the birds weren't singing. I got up slowly, opened the window, and looked outside. The sky was cloudy, but no sign of rain. The streets were clean, the houses exactly as they always were, but no one in sight. No cars, no doors opening, no footsteps on the pavement. It seemed like everyone had simply vanished or decided, at the same time, to stay home. Even the lady from 104's dog wasn't barking anymore. The strangest thing was that the lights in most houses were still on, even in the morning, as if people were still inside, just motionless. I watched for a few minutes, waiting for some movement. When I noticed a curtain moving in the apartment across the way, I felt a surge of relief, but the relief was short-lived. The curtain moved with exaggerated slowness, as if being pulled by someone who wasn't quite sure what they were doing. And then, through the glass, I saw a face. It was Mr. Larkin from 202. He was just staring blankly at the sky, unblinking, expressionless. The curtain slowly dropped back down, and the window was closed. I went back inside and tried to make a call. I called my sister, then my friend Mark, and then the city's main line. All the numbers rang, but none answered, until one call connected. My sister's name appeared on the cell phone screen. I answered immediately. Hello? Silence. Then a voice emerged, but it wasn't hers. It was low, soft, strangely calm. Everything's fine now. Stay home. Await instructions. I hung up immediately. I don't know why it scared me so much. It wasn't a threat. It was a tone. Too calm, too controlled, as if someone had been trained to soothe me. But I wasn't calm, and something told me I shouldn't be. Shortly after, I heard footsteps in the hallway. I went to the door and looked through the peephole. It was a teenager from B13, the skateboard kid, but he didn't have his skateboard with him. He just walked slowly down the hall, looking at each door. He reached mine, paused for a few seconds, and then whispered something too low for me to understand. Then he continued walking to the end of the hall and disappeared down the stairs. I opened the door slightly and called out to him, but he didn't respond. He didn't even turn his head. That night was even stranger. The streetlights flickered like a bulb about to burn out. In a moment of nervousness, I yelled out the window, asking if anyone knew what was happening. No answer, but in the distance, I heard the sound of a door opening, and then another. Suddenly, all over the block, several doors slowly began to open. People emerged from their homes, but they didn't speak, they didn't interact. They just walked silently into the street, looking up at nothing, as if they were waiting for something to fall from the sky. There was Mr. Larkin, standing in the middle of the street, still with that empty expression. The lady from 104 was beside him, with her dog, which was now lying motionless, eyes open. The teenager was there too. No one moved anymore. I stood there, watching, my heart pounding. And then, as if they received an invisible command, they all went back inside at the same time. I closed the curtains, turned off the lights, and sat on the kitchen floor. Something was happening. And it wasn't just a simple alert. No one seemed scared. And that's what bothered me the most. It was as if they had accepted a new rule, a new logic, and I was the only one who still hadn't figured out what it was. I woke up the next day with a strange feeling in my body. It wasn't pain or tiredness, but a kind of weight on my shoulders, as if the air was denser. The ceiling seemed lower. The silence was no longer strange. It was a new normal. I got out of bed with difficulty, drank some coffee that tasted like paper, and went to the door. When I tried to turn the doorknob, it wouldn't budge. I tried again, harder. Nothing. It was locked from the outside. This made no sense. There was no lock on the outside of the door. At least, not that I knew of. I pushed bang forced. Nothing gave way. I went to the living room window and tried to open it, but I noticed the glass was different. It didn't reflect properly. It was as if a film had been glued to the outside. I grabbed a hammer from the cabinet and hit it hard. The glass cracked, then broke, and a cold wind rushed through the opening. But the air had a strange smell. It wasn't pollution or mold. It was sweet, almost perfumed, but artificial. A smell that made everything seem too clean, as if the world had been forcibly sanitized. I looked out through the cracks and saw the mailman. He walked slowly, with regular steps, carrying nothing in his hands. He passed the mailboxes, but didn't put anything in any of them. He just walked to the end of the street and stopped. He stood there, looking at nothing. I kept watching until he turned and came back the same way, at the same pace. As he passed my window, he looked directly at me, not with surprise or shock. He just stared as if I were the strange one in this story. I closed the window and went to the kitchen. I turned on the microwave to heat up some food, but the panel showed something strange. Instead of numbers or functions, the same alert message appeared. The words were repeating. Remain at home. Await instructions. Everything's fine now. I turned the appliance off immediately. I looked around. The TV was off but flickering, as if trying to turn on. My laptop no longer powered up. The radio played static, with small whispers I couldn't identify. I went to the door again. The doorknob still locked. I began to wonder if someone had done that during the night. But who and why? I grabbed a kitchen knife, not for protection, but because the idea of being trapped in my own home really started to weigh on me. Not because of the lack of freedom itself, but because of the absence of any explanation. Later, I heard noises in the hallway, slow footsteps, someone whispering. I approached the door and listened intently. The voice repeated, almost like a child learning a new phrase. Everything's fine now. You're safe. I went to the peephole. It was a woman from 103. She was going from door to door, pressing her forehead against the wood and saying those words softly. Then she would smile and continue. Her face seemed too serene, as if she had achieved some forced peace. When she reached my door, she did the same, said the words, pressed her head, and stayed there for a minute, quiet, until she left. I stood motionless for a long time. When I finally managed to get off the floor, I noticed something even more unsettling. All the mirrors in the house, in the bathroom, the living room, and even on the back of the closet door, were fogged up. No windows had condensation. There was no steam, but the mirrors looked like they had been touched. And in the center of each, there was a mark, as if someone had written a single phrase with their finger. Stay home. It was as if the message was trying to get inside me in every possible way. Through the screen, through the sound, through the smell, now even through reflection. I didn't sleep that night. The world outside seemed mute, and inside me, something was starting to stir. It wasn't exactly fear. It was doubt, as if a part of my mind was starting to think that maybe, just maybe, they were right, and that I really should just stay home. I was starting to lose track of time. Hours no longer passed as before. The sky maintained that grayish hue, neither night nor day, as if the world had been put on standby. Food was running out. The refrigerator light flickered, as if even the electricity was afraid to stay on. I no longer received new alerts, but the original message kept flashing on all the devices that still worked, even the ones that were off. It had become a kind of ghost. On the fourth night, I heard knocking on the kitchen window, 3 dry taps. Then silence. I couldn't see anyone outside. Through the crack, I could only see the tall weeds of the community garden and the motionless outline of an abandoned car. But there was something about that knocking. It wasn't random. It was human, measured, as if it was being used to get my attention, not to scare me. The next morning, a sheet of paper was pushed under my door. It was a handwritten letter with shaky letters. It said, "If you still think for yourself, come down to the basement of Block C. Bring paper. No devices." It was signed only with a name, Clark. I thought of 1,000 ways this could be a trap. But in the end, the idea of staying there, trapped and alone, was worse. I exited to the laundry room window, which was in the back and still had a simple latch. I walked through the back of the buildings, keeping my head down. The silence followed me, but it was an oppressive silence, full of invisible eyes. I saw some people through the windows, empty faces, all looking inside their own homes, as if they had given up on the world. I reached Block C, where the basement was partially open, with a rock propping the door. I went down the stairs cautiously, and there in the dark, I found Clark, a thin man, unshaven, wearing an old military coat and holding a flashlight. He didn't look dangerous, but he didn't look calm either. He led me to a corner of the basement, where 3 others were sitting on the floor with pads of paper, writing. Clark spoke softly, as if even the walls there could hear. "You saw the alert, right?" "Yes." "Then you're already compromised. But maybe there's still time." I asked what he meant by compromise, and that's when he explained everything. The alert we received wasn't a warning message. It wasn't meant to protect us. It was the beginning, the entry, the vector. They designed the alert to seem safe. Cold, direct, clean, but it was designed to fix itself in the mind. Repetition, color, tone. It wasn't sent to inform. It was sent to condition. He showed me a portable radio that had been disassembled. The wires were black, as if burned. Every device that receives a signal is corroded, but not physically. The corrosion is mental. First you agree to stay home. Then you agree not to look out the window. Then you agree that you don't need to go out anymore, until the thought of going out doesn't even exist. A woman in the group, with hollow eyes and trembling fingers, said her husband started repeating phrases a week before the alert. She said he had already received the call, and that after that, he just smiled and said everything was better now. Clark showed me hand-drawn images, representing signal patterns, spiral waves, truncated texts. These shapes repeat in the visual alerts. They get stuck in the brain like a virus. Most people accept it. Some, like us, resist. But for how long? I remained silent. My stomach churned. The alert, which until then I had treated as a strange warning, was part of the contamination. There were no sirens because the threat wasn't external. It was inside everyone's head, planted there with a phrase and a color. Before leaving, Clark handed me a sheet of paper with notes. There was a hand-drawn map marking the center town, where an old emergency transmission truck was located. According to him, that's where the signals were coming from. If you can shut that down, maybe there'll be time for the few who still resist. "What about you?" I asked. "I've seen the alert for too long." I returned home by the same route, avoiding the glazed eyes of those peeking through windows. Upon arrival, I closed all the curtains, turned off all remaining appliances, and sat on the floor, looking at the crumpled paper in my hands. For the first time, I felt there was something bigger than just a system error, and that my mind had been molding for days. Perhaps from the very first moment I looked at that red screen. But now I knew. In the following days, I started to notice that something inside me was changing. It wasn't physical. My body was still the same. I still looked at myself in the mirror with that expression of accumulated tiredness. But my thoughts, they began to repeat themselves. I noticed patterns in my own senses. I would think something and, seconds later, repeat it in a low voice, as if trying to convince myself. Sometimes, I would write something in the notebook Clark gave me, and when I reread it, it felt like it wasn't me who wrote it. The words came too easily. Stay home. Everything's fine now. Avoid windows. I didn't want to think about it, but the thoughts came on their own. Like an echo, I started to distrust myself, my own mind, and that's the kind of fear you can't run from. One night, I woke up with a sensation of being watched. The hallway light was on, even though I remembered turning it off. I went there and saw wet footprints on the floor, small like bare feet. They went from the front door to the bathroom. I followed slowly, my heart pounding. The bathroom was empty, but the mirror was fogged up, and in the center, someone had written with their finger, "You're almost ready." That night, I didn't go back to sleep. I sat on the bedroom floor with the flashlight on, the kitchen knife beside me, and the notebook open. I forced myself to write something different. I tried to remember my sister's name, the town where I was born, my favorite food. But the more I tried, the emptier everything seemed. The memories were there, but they crumbled into details, like dreams told too late. It was as if the parts that made me up were being deleted one by one. The next day, I decided to go back to the basement to look for Clark. The door was ajar as before, but no one was there. The place seemed abandoned for days, even though I knew I had been there a short time ago. On the floor, only a sheet of paper with a red spiral drawing. On the back, a phrase written in red pen. The more you look, the more it understands you. From then on, I began to question if Clark had even existed, if that group of people was really there, or if my mind, in an attempt to protect itself, created a fantasy of resistance to keep me functioning. But the map was still with me, the notes too, and the anguish wasn't a product of imagination. That I knew. On the way back, I saw a man standing in front of the building, looking at the sky. He was wearing a delivery uniform, completely dirty. His head was tilted back at a strange angle, as if his neck had locked up. The most disturbing thing was that he was smiling, not aggressively. It was a serene, calm smile, like someone who fully accepts what is about to happen. He slowly turned his head and looked at me. He didn't say anything, but the smile widened. I ran up the stairs, locked the door with all the furniture I could drag, and locked myself in the bathroom. I was breathing too fast. My hands were shaking. My thoughts were jumbled. I looked in the mirror and tried to repeat my name out loud. I couldn't. My mouth opened, but no words came out. Just that feeling that the name no longer belonged to me. I was someone, but I didn't know who, and the part of me that knew was already gone. In the following hours, I heard knocking on the door. It was rhythmic, soft, like the knocking on the window days earlier. And between each knock, a soft voice said, "You're ready now. Let me in." The voice sounded like my sister's, or maybe my mother's, or maybe my own. I can't tell, but it was familiar, and that's what scared me the most. I spent the rest of the night in absolute silence, trying not to think, not to hear, not to feel. But even with my eyes closed, I saw flickering images, the red background, the white letters, the repeated message. And when I opened my eyes, I realized I had written on the floor with charcoal from the stove, "Everything's better now." I didn't remember doing that, but the handwriting was mine. Or, at least, it was similar enough. When dawn broke, the sky seemed even more wrong. The light had no defined color, as if the sun was trying to rise. But something was blocking the last part of the morning. Time didn't pass correctly. My wristwatch spun the numbers as if it were in test mode. My cell phone battery had finally died. Even the silence seemed denser. I still had the map in my hands. The signal truck was marked with a circle in the center of Red Pine Falls, in front of the old radio station building. It was far and the path was exposed. But if I didn't go, I already knew my fate, to become another smiling body staring at the sky. I grabbed a notebook, a flashlight, a knife, and the remaining water bottle. I left through the back laundry room, the same way as before. The streets were empty, but not like an ordinary night. It was a programmed absence, as if someone had emptied the world. So I would have no one to talk to. Halfway there, I saw a child standing on the sidewalk, alone. She was looking at the pavement, hand behind her back, humming something without a melody. When I passed her, she stopped singing. She looked at me and said in a low voice, "You're going there, aren't you?" "They know." And then she went back to singing. I stood paralyzed for a few seconds. I tried to ask who they were, but she just turned and went into the house next door, without rushing. I kept walking, and the closer I got to center town, the more I felt like I was walking inside a glass corridor. The store windows displayed mannequins facing outwards, all with their faces covered by red cloths. This wasn't normal. This wasn't part of the decor. It had been placed there afterwards, by someone, or by someone that wanted to see me pass by. Finally, I reached the spot indicated on the map. The old radio station was locked, but behind it, in the empty lot, was a truck. A military vehicle, gray, without license plates. The windows were dark and the engine was off. Even so, the chassis vibrated, as if some machine inside was still operating. On the side, an LED panel flashed with the same message. Remain at home. Await instructions. I approached slowly, my eyes fixed on the words. The feeling of being pulled was real. Not physically, but as if my mind wanted to get closer, understand, obey. When I put my hand on the doorknob, I heard a voice behind me. Don't touch that. I turned and saw a man leaning against the wall, holding an iron bar. His face was dirty, his gaze tired. He was one of the locals I used to see at the market, but I couldn't remember his name. He approached. Can you still think? I nodded, unsure if it was true. Then we have a chance. His name was Martin. He had been hiding in the city center service tunnels, trying to track the signal. He told me more people had tried to destroy that truck, but they couldn't even get close. Most gave up halfway. Others simply stopped. With his help, we opened the back of the vehicle. Inside, it was worse than I imagined. There was no one, but there were screens. Many screens, and all of them displayed faces. Hundreds of faces of the town's residents, repeating synchronized phrases. Some screens showed house rooms, others showed empty streets. It was as if the truck was watching the entire town, recording every word spoken, every window closed. Martin started destroying the wires with the iron bar while I looked for the generator. The machine trembled, as if trying to resist. When I finally cut the power cables, the screens flickered and began to shut down one by one. The sound of the voices diminished to just a whisper, and then silence. But it wasn't the end. Martin stopped moving. He stood still in the middle of the truck bed, looking at the last screen still on. It was his face, but he was smiling. He fell to the ground shortly after. No scream, no struggle. He just fell. I rushed him, but he had no pulse. His face still showed that serene smile. For a second, I thought I was smiling too. I put my hand on my face. It was normal, but the thought lingered. I got out of there as fast as I could, running through increasingly distorted streets. The houses seemed tilted. The trees seemed to be watching me, and the feeling of being followed never left me. When I finally reached the edge of the town, I no longer knew if I had managed to escape the signal or if I was just carrying it with me. I stayed out of town for a while, hidden in an abandoned shed on the outskirts of Red Pine Falls, eating the little I had saved and drinking rainwater. I thought maybe I had won, that the destroyed truck meant the end of the signal. But every night I heard something, not outside the shed. Inside me, low voices, repeating the same thing. Not like a thought. It was deeper than that. As if my mind had been re-recorded by a program that was still running in the background. During the third day in that shelter, I noticed a red light flashing in the sky. It was a drone, not a military one. Small, commercial. It came from the north, circled my position, and then left. The next day, another appeared. It wasn't a coincidence. They were still monitoring. They were still searching. That's when I understood. The truck wasn't the source. It was just one of the transmitters. Like one tower among many. The central hub was still active, and the hub was what fed the voices. I went back. I knew it was a stupid decision, but I needed to know where it was coming from. I walked back through the forest to the west side of town. What I saw paralyzed me. Red Pine Falls wasn't abandoned. On the contrary, it seemed in order. The lights in the houses were all on. The curtains perfectly aligned. Some children were playing on the sidewalk, but the way they moved was too artificial, as if every gesture had been rehearsed, as if every resident was living a perfect simulation of their old life, and everyone was smiling. I found what I was looking for in the old part town, near the disused train tracks. An emergency operations center had been set up in an old school. Inside, through a broken window, I saw cables, panels, antennas, and a room full of people. They were sitting in chairs, side by side, with headphones and monitors on. Their eyes were open but unblinking. Some mumbled nonsense words. Others just took a deep breath and repeated, "You're safe now." There were no supervisors, no security, just them functioning like pieces of a living machine. I walked among them. None reacted, and in the center of the room, a single screen displayed an aerial view of Red Pine Falls. And at the bottom of the screen, a phrase silently rotated. Stable connection. Active transmission. I didn't know what to do. Unplug cables? Destroy equipment? Part of me just wanted to run. But another part wanted to sit there too. Put on the headphones. Be silent. Stop feeling. Stop being. But I forced myself to leave. On the way back, I saw my own face reflected in a storefront. I was sweaty, pale, but something was wrong. My eyes weren't blinking, and there was a slight smile at the corner of my mouth. The same smile I saw on the mailman, on the delivery guy, on the child. Maybe I had already passed the point of no return. I fled the town that same night, not by road, nor by the known trails. I cut through the dense woods, following only instinct and what was left of my free will. I walked for hours until the sound disappeared. Not the sound of the town, the sound inside my head. I found shelter in an abandoned cabin in the mountains. Since then, I avoid any electronic devices. I use candles, write by hand, eat what I can hunt or grow. I don't connect with anyone. Sometimes I see smoke on the horizon. Sometimes I hear voices that sound human, but I'm not sure. I never go to them. 6 months have passed. The signal is gone, but not the thoughts. I still dream of the phrase. I still wake up with the feeling that I'm smiling, even when I'm not. Sometimes I forget my name for a few minutes. Sometimes I catch myself repeating phrases I didn't write. The world didn't end, but it changed. Red Pine Falls was just a test site, an experiment. Perhaps other places have already been corrected. Perhaps this is a new way to control people, not with force, but with quiet obedience. A screen, a soft voice, an order that sounds like care. If you saw the alert, even for a second, it might already be too late. Story 8. My life was a gift. I don't know who to turn to. At this point, I'm not what's real anymore. Let me start at the beginning. A few years ago, my life wasn't going well. I was in debt and about to become homeless. I was at my wit's end and felt like I was about to do something stupid. One day I felt compelled to check my bank account. I don't know why. I was well aware that my account was well into the minus. Amazingly, when I checked my account, I had over $1,000. I didn't know where it came from, and I didn't care. I know you're supposed to report stuff this, but with the situation I was in, you can understand why I didn't. A few days later, I checked my account again. Over $10,000 now sat in my account. I didn't know who my mysterious benefactor was, and I was too happy to care. This went on for a few months, and eventually I had millions. I had a big house in a gated community, and a few cars I had always wanted. Life was good, and it was about to get better. Even though I was very wealthy, I still wasn't very social. Sure, I went to bar a few times and bought round for everyone, but honestly, who wouldn't? I was at a fancy lounge one night. I was out on the balcony looking out over the city, wondering if my luck would last. That's when I met her. That's the night I met Lilith. She was absolutely gorgeous. Hair as black as night, and wearing a black sequin gown. Probably the best dress in the place. She came and stood next to me at the balcony railing, and we hit it off immediately. It was like she appeared from nowhere and wasn't even interested in the party and just wanted to talk to me, which, knowing what I know now, is most likely true. For a few years, Lilith and I lived together happily. She was perfect. She liked all the things I liked. Same food, movies, music, hobbies, everything. Honestly, it got boring sometimes. You need challenge in life. Having someone agree with you constantly is dull. We got on great. She met some of my family, and they got along too. I wanted to meet her family, but she just said she wasn't in contact with them anymore. I decided not to press her on it, because I figured it was a sensitive subject. The years went on. The money kept coming and Lilith was pregnant. I was the happiest I had ever been. I went crazy with decorating the baby's room, and buying everything we would need. I even bought a new SUV to put a car seat in. A sports car exactly fit for an infant. When it came to baby names, it was the only time we disagreed. We found out it was going to be a boy and started thinking about names. I wanted to name him after my grandfather. However, she wasn't moved. Every time we talked about it, she was firm. The boy's name would be Raziel. I figure it was because she was very gothish. I kind of liked it, truth be told. The time came. We went to the hospital and were sat in maternity ward. After a long, exhausting night, in my arms I held my own flesh and blood. My son, Raziel. The night after the birth, I was sitting next to Lilith's hospital bed, holding Raziel. I sat there looking at the two most important things in my life. I knew I would do anything for them. I felt like the luckiest man on earth. That's when it happened. The event that has shaken everything I believed to be real. The nurse finished checking on Lilith and left the room. Just as she left, the hallway lights turned off. The light in the room began to flicker and Lilith began smiling at me while giving me a Kubrick stare. I was too unnerved to even ask her what she was doing. I looked over to the door. A black mist began to form on the floor within the darkness of the hallway. I can't describe exactly what I felt when I saw this. It was like I was extremely hot, but extremely cold at the same time. My head and chest felt heavy. Out of the mist stepped a man in a sleek black suit. The mist enveloped him as he moved toward me. He walked slowly into the room and towards a chair opposite me. It felt like an eternity between each of his footsteps, which seemed weightless but somehow shook the floor. He sat across from me and stared me down with his bright amber-colored eyes. Between the stranger and Lilith both staring at me, I finally pushed out some words. "Who are you?" The corners of his mouth curled into a crooked smirk. I have many names, most of which are forgotten. Some are muttered in times of weakness, others in damnation. I could barely hold myself together. "Oh my God." "Not quite." He leaned forward in his chair. "Do you like your gifts?" "It was you?" "The money?" "Don't forget your family." "Dear boy, are they not the best gift?" "We're talking about, don't you hurt my family." "Oh, I would never harm them, especially young Raziel here." "How do you know his name?" "I chose it." I looked to my son in my arms, then to Lilith, still gazing at me unblinking. "What do you want from us? Why do this?" "The money for all those years." "Lilith, is Lilith a gift too?" "Of course. Did you not ask for this? In your times of darkness, did you not ask for assistance? You prayed to many, but I alone listened." "Who the fuck are you?" I was sobbing at this point. I had no idea what was happening anymore. "I'm simply a businessman. I'm here to collect on my part of the deal." "My soul?" He laughed to himself. "Not this time, no." He gestures towards my son. "I am merely here to see Raziel here." He reaches over and gently gives Raziel's tiny hand a shake. He smiles at my son and leans back in his chair again. "Listen carefully to me. Ensure the safety of this child. Your life will continue as it has these past few years. You will remain wealthy. Once I leave, everything will be as it should. I don't care about the money anymore. My family is enough wealth for me now. Don't be foolish. Disregarding a gift from me is very unwise." He stands up from his chair and looks down upon me. "Treasure these moments while you can. There will come a day when I return for the child. His destiny lies elsewhere." And with that, he walks out of the room and dissipates as he reaches the hallway. The lights return, and everything returns to normal. I turn to Lilith, who seems to back to her ordinary self. "Babe, I could destroy a bacon cheeseburger right now." Her smile fades as she sees me, probably still a wreck. "Babe, what's wrong? How did she just ask about food at a time like this? Does she not remember what just happened?" I still doubt it was real sometimes. I never mentioned it to Lilith. I don't want her to think I'm crazy or even worse, that it was real and she knows exactly who that man was. I still get nightmares about it. I've even noticed that anyone I interact with feels like they're on a script. They're way too nice. Neighbors I don't like smile and wave when I drive past. Creepy body snatcher type stuff. I write this as I look over Raziel in his crib. He's sound asleep. He's perfect. Too perfect. He barely cries or makes a sound. He's done settling. I don't know how it's possible, but I don't think he's even mine. Story 9. I found our old home robot on the very day I tried to forget everything about her. She's been gone for 2 years. Most of her stuff was boxed up quite long ago, but yesterday, while I was digging through the hall closet to replace a dead light bulb, I found our Ball-eye, a tiny telepresence robot shaped like a white ball on wheels. Ball-eye had kept us connected during the worst of distance. Late night check-ins, rolling into frame to say good morning, glitchy video calls that somehow made it feel like she was right there with me. Long distance was very hard, but Ball-eye made it easier. It made us stronger. She died in a car accident. I don't like to remember much else. Finding it should have been nothing. Just another thing to throw away or donate. It was wedged behind an old box of clothes, scuffed up and still dusty from the move. For some reason, I sat there on the floor within my lap for a long time. I couldn't remember the last time we used it, or why I hadn't just gotten rid of it after her funeral. I checked the battery hatch on instinct. All empty. I didn't know what I expected. That it might power up and chirp her name, or replay some forgotten message she'd left behind. Maybe that would feel like her again. Just for a second, I put in fresh batteries. Nothing happened. Some part of me was relieved. I left in the corner of the living room, by the bookshelf, facing the wall. I didn't mean to keep it. I just didn't throw it out. That night, I couldn't sleep. It was not just an ordinary day, a special day. It could have been had she been here with me. The house felt heavier than usual. I kept thinking about her. Not the good parts. Not the laugh or the smell of her hair. Just the crash. The sirens. The finality. I didn't remember the anniversary until I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, eyes well with tears and the room bathed in the gray, dim light of everything. It would have been 3 years today. Sometime around 2 a.m., I heard something moving, a soft yet glitchy mechanical whir. Something rolling across the wooden floor, possibly in the living room of my apartment. I sat up, hard in my throat. It was dark, but I could hear some chaotic movement in the silence of it all. I left bed to walk through the corridor, the whirring getting closer. I had to reach the end of the passage to switch on the lights. Just then, something caught under my foot, and I fell flat to my face. I was already troubled, and the dry eyes from me crying in bed made it really hard for me to see anything clearly. I lay on the ground for a while. My nose hurt. I could feel a cold stream of blood flow from my nostrils, meeting my lip. My tongue could taste the metallic, salty taste that had mixed with the tears from my eyes, that were seemed to zoom past. I then heard something hit a corner again and again. I sat up, gasping, hand pressed to my face, and saw it. A dim, orangish-red light in the corner of the living room. Ball-eye was there by the wall. The fresh batteries I had put in, perhaps they were already dying. I couldn't believe my eyes. I crawled forward on my knees, dazed, vision blurred. The light beneath its lens flickered violently now, painting the floor in dull red pulses. Its speaker hissed and popped, the air thick with low static. Then, in a voice that wasn't hers but wanted to be, it said, "Done. Any me be. Gone dash. Don't let me be. Go knee." Glitched. Broken. Robotic. Again. Louder. "Don't let me be gone." The red light throbbed with each word, and Ball-eye jittered slightly, its wheels twitching like it was straining to move or hold something back. The tiny screen on its front, once used for calls, flickered to life. Through the static and digital noise, I saw what looked like a face. Pale, still, almost featureless, but unmistakably hers, or some corrupted echo of it trapped in black and white distortion, flickering in and out like a bad connection from a world that no longer exists. and then it stopped moving. Just sat there, screen buzzing softly, watching me, dying its death. I stayed on the floor, nose still bleeding, my chest tight with something between fear and grief. Unable to crawl forward or back. I don't know what I brought back when I turned it on, but it wasn't her. Story 10. USS Donovan Entry 1. I want to preface this by saying that legally, the USS Donovan and the Darwin voyages do not exist, nor have they ever existed in U.S. military records or any American history. What I am about to tell you is the truth of why sailors do many things, and of why I will never return to the sea so long as I live. My name is Francis. Who I am, where I come from, that's not important. What is important is this. I served as a Navy hull technician for nearly 8 years. I was discharged at the rank of Chief Petty Officer and served as manager and supervisor of HDS aboard the USS Donovan. I saw everything that happened there, even that which others would never believe. But that is for later. Right now, all you must know is that the USS Donovan was not a normal destroyer. The USS Donovan was almost a punishment of sorts, an assignment so terrible anyone sent to ashore would come back worse off. It was old, real old, constructed roughly during the end of WW2. It was a miracle that thing floated at all, let alone allowed a manned crew to treat it like a proper Navy vessel. The hulls of the ship were fighting a losing battle to rust, and where, as was the rest of the ship, the only place that wasn't in a losing battle with the sea was Captain Sodark's quarters. Sodark was a real tool, some trumped-up captain who got his way up there with daddy's money. He was a weaselly little man with a short mustache and constantly greased hair. He looked as if a rat from below deck had put on a cheap Halloween costume of a person and called it a day, and he was just as mean as a rat. He would have you chipping rust off the bow for coughing during a meal, let alone any actual infractions. Overall, it wasn't the ship that was a punishment, it was Sodark. That was what we all thought in our first weeks. Truth is, there's far worse things than Captain Sodark on the USS Darwin, and I'm going to tell you all I know. Good news is, I was able to dig up some old notebooks I kept from the time. I was always studious when it came to notes, so I have full confidence in what I tell you. Many people think all that lives in the sea are fish, sharks, dolphins, and whales. That isn't nearly true. There's a whole host of things we sailors don't speak of. Things that make a normal land-faring man crawl. This next part will be some excerpts I wrote. Logs, if you would, about the biologically impossible or supernatural we were witness to in our time. Banana fish. Don't be confused by the name. These aren't the tropical fish with yellow stripes you might know of. Have you ever heard the old rule about never bringing bananas onto a boat? Something about spoiling fruit and sinking ships, bad luck and all that. Well, that wasn't entirely a farce to keep others out of the banana trade. A banana fish is much like a silverfish. It lives inside the bananas grown near Cape Horn, Argentina, and is often picked up by accident due to the ignorance or malice of the seller. They are about 5 to 7 inches long, with slime down and curved yellow bodies and pincers. An inch long, they have 4 beady little eyes on their head with antennae on the back. They stand on legs nearly half an inch tall, with 6 legs. They can burrow through almost anything, including the hulls of rusted ships or wooden boats. In days of old, they would crawl into the other food stocks at night, eating them from the inside and causing them to rot before sneaking back into the walls or the ship or the bananas, which were always left intact. On rare occasion, a sailor might pick up enough banana fish to cause what's called a banana swarm. Clouds of banana fish burrowing and chewing through the boat, causing it to sink, and nothing but bananas to rise to the surface, an omen thought to be caused by the bananas themselves. Banana fish aren't too hard to deal with, and even Quell's sailor always brings a hammer to produce checks. And the banana fish aren't venomous at all, just a nuisance, and a simple one at that. Many sailors save the hassle and just don't sell or travel with bananas at all, especially not anymore in the times of modern commercial seafaring. I once had a nasty encounter with banana fish. We had picked up a crate off one of the Navy suppliers at port. Food, they said. When we open it, it turned out to be a whole container of produce, mostly bananas, but some rotten apples, melons, citrus, and tropical fruits lay just atop the piles of bananas by the time we had loaded the container's contents into one of our pantries, as we like to call them. Some of the men had talked about seeing parts of piles wriggle or move. We all chalked it up to the drunken bosun's mate and his crewman. Another late night binge back, before regulations were enforced as much. Not as if they ever were with an environment like ours. But anyways, back to the story. I had been put on first watch, and as such, I was dozing off right next to the pantry door, having a great dream about a lady, when all of a sudden I awoke to find myself covered in roosting banana fish, who were using me for warmth, I suppose. Needless to say, old Beckett went in there with fire extinguisher and a hammer, and didn't come out till every single one of those bugs was stomped or drowned in foam. I still remember how they wriggled on me, inspected me with their tweezer like antennae, as if I was another succulent piece of fruit. There hasn't been a night since when I haven't carried a hammer with me to bed. Sirens. When one thinks of sirens, one would most often imagine a beautiful woman with a fish's lower half, singing a song that lured sailors to their doom with an enchanting song. In this case, dispel that notion immediately. It's not true at all. I don't entirely know what sirens are, nor what they're officially classified as. We refer to them as sirens simply because there is no better term. Sirens are tall humanoids with full bodies of scales and fins. Their hands and feet are webbed and carry claws, thick enough to leave scratches in metal and cut men to ribbons. They stand anywhere from 6 to 8 feet tall, and where one would assume a humanoid head lay, is instead that of an anglerfish, large teeth, bulbous eyes, and a lure. They walk upright when on land or deck, but have a habit of crawling through vents and contorting themselves to crawl on all fours while they hunt. The reason we call them sirens is because of the way they hunt. They can mimic voices very well. Anything they've ever heard they can recollect. So they're especially dangerous if they've been successful hunting. Most sirens hunt solo, with younger sirens, usually only 5 feet tall, tagging along with their parents as they learn. Sirens inhabit all waters of the ocean, but are well known in the Pacific, Antarctic, and Indian Oceans. The cold weather and hot weather sirens look different. Cold weather sirens are white in color with bulbous eyes and a bright lure, while hot weather sirens are multicolored and have dimmed lures and smaller eyes. Cold weathers are always the worst. They are aggressive as all hell and consider the Antarctic theirs to keep. I had more than a few friends lured into a siren's grip and either torn apart or dragged into the sea kicking and screaming. But I'll always remember Petty Officer Johnson. Johnson was an old head. He'd been around the Donovan for nearly 10 years, and to us was practically a god. He taught me the ropes, and was the first of the crew to catalog the things we saw. One night Johnson was walking back to his bunk, I presume. I only know because he had met up with me at the mess hall beforehand, and was wasted. By the time the screams began, I wasn't far behind him. When I ran into the hall, I saw Johnson first, limp and lifeless, and then the siren huge with Johnson's head in its mouth. It looked over at me, as I had caught it mid-kill. The thing let out a yell I knew to be Johnson's and chased after me. Ducking through hallways, I saw a few other dead crewmen, their bodies desecrated, and their head all bitten off and chewed up. The siren was hunting us for sport that night. I ducked into the first place I could, the fabrication shop. Ducking between poles and projects, I dipped beneath a metal bench, holding my breath as the siren entered. It stalked along the walkway, eventually getting to my table. Its web feet stopped, and I heard the thud of Johnson getting dropped beside me. Almost relieved, I looked down at Johnson. His face was mauled and unrecognizable. His eyes stared forward within the bite-marred face he now had. Blood pooled around him as the creature walked forward. I had to think to something, anything. So I did the bandsaw, a piece of equipment built before safety was a common thought. Terrifying to use at any point. Perfect for me. As the creature walked along, I snuck the controls, turning it on before ducking away. The machine roared to life, and the blade began spinning. The siren ran to it, looking it over in a curious way. That saw was the last thing it saw, as I got behind it with a large piece of metal and bashed the thing into the saw. It screamed and screamed, getting pulled down by the saw as it cut him straight down the middle. By the time I turned the damn thing off, the siren was cut from stomach to lure in half. Kneeling against it lifelessly, I spat on the bastard for what it did and returned to my bunk. That morning we held a service for Johnson and all the other shipmates who had been killed by the thing. However, their bodies were never found. The shipmates. People like to talk about the ghosts they've seen aboard older ships, men in dungarees and peaked caps walking along and asking for a smoke or where the med bay was, only to disappear into the darkness of some hallway or discredited shadow-filled corner. They always tell the same stories. And we on the Donovan had our own. The shipmates were said to be men who fell to the other threats aboard the Donovan, caught between life and death begging for release. Currently we have no way to release them from this, so they are a constant annoyance to us. Shipmates like to pop up when you least expect it. They'll make off with your razor, or hang on the top bunk, and watch you from the corner with a smile. The few who have seemed more interested in their matters besides trickery have talked about horrid things beyond the realm in which you and I reside. It's eternity in there. We suffer with the things below deck. We have seen things beyond you, sailor. Turn back. Abandon all hope, ye who enter here. That last one stuck with me, mainly because the man who said it was one I knew in life, and I was assured he had never read Dante's Inferno. I'm sorry to say my memory is a little foggy now. I will be around to update this place with more of my adventures. But in the meantime, don't listen to the voices. Stamp out anything yellow and pray. One thing I have begun to notice is that those who met with the ghosts of men past often were always hanging by the time we found them the night after. I still do not understand why or how, seeing as we were below deck and out of the way of any rope.